Welcome, weary travelers, to History for the Tired, your sanctuary for timeless stories. Today, we embark on an extraordinary journey into the heart of ancient Greece, a land where gods walked among mortals. Heroes achieved the impossible, and the very fabric of reality was woven with divine intervention. We'll delve into the captivating world of Greek mythology, where every tale is a whisper from Olympus, rich with lessons, drama, and wonder. Our purpose here is to transport you, to allow these ancient narratives to wash over you, providing not just knowledge, but also a moment of calm and reflection in your busy lives. So, dim the lights, find your most comfortable spot, and let us begin to unravel the threads of these magnificent myths together. In the very beginning, before time was measured or stars twinkled in the sky, there was only chaos. Imagine an infinite, swirling void, boundless and formless, a vast, dark emptiness from which everything that would ever exist would eventually emerge. This was not a god, but rather the primordial state of existence itself, a raw, undifferentiated potential. It was an abyss, a gaping chasm, the absolute absence of order or definition. Yet, within this boundless nothingness, the seeds of creation stirred, stirring with an invisible, unimaginable force. From chaos, not born, but simply appearing or manifesting, came the first fundamental beings, entities so ancient and profound that their very existence shaped the cosmos. These were the primordial deities, the first architects of reality, the foundational elements upon which all later creation would rest. They were not merely living beings as we understand them, but elemental forces, embodiments of the most basic concepts: the earth, the underworld, love, darkness, night, light, and day. The very first to emerge from this primal void was Gaia, the earth. She was the solid foundation, the nurturing mother, the fertile ground from which all life would spring. Her presence brought stability to the swirling chaos, giving it form and substance. Imagine the vast, silent earth, a living entity, ancient beyond comprehension, stretching out beneath an as-yet informed sky. Alongside Gaia, or perhaps immediately following her, came Tartarus, the deep abyss, a dark and formidable realm that would later serve as the deepest part of the underworld, a prison for the most dangerous beings. Tartarus was not just a place, it was a primordial entity of profound darkness and immense depth, an inescapable pit beneath the very roots of the earth. And then there was Eros, the primal force of love and desire. Eros was not merely a cute, winged cherub. He was a fundamental, irresistible power, the compelling urge that brought beings together, inspiring procreation and creation itself. He was the catalyst for connection, the driving force that sparked the union of the emerging elements, ensuring that the nascent cosmos would continue to expand and develop. Without Eros, creation might have stalled, remaining solitary and unproductive. These three, Gaia, Tartarus, and Eros, were the first profound statements in the cosmic symphony, establishing the most fundamental aspects of existence: the physical world, its deepest foundations, and the animating force of attraction. From chaos also sprang Erebus, the personification of primordial darkness, a thick, suffocating gloom that filled the empty spaces of the cosmos. And from Erebus, in turn, came Nyx, the night, a powerful and awe-inspiring goddess whose veiled presence brought shadows and mystery. Nyx was an immensely ancient and powerful deity, older than even Gaia in some traditions, and even Zeus himself held a certain reverence and fear for her. These were 12 colossal and powerful entities, 6 male and 6 female, representing immense cosmic forces and aspects of the early universe. He embodied the primal waters, a calm but incredibly powerful force. They were Jaya, the nurturing earth, without a male partner initially, gave birth to 2 more significant primordial entities. First, she brought forth Uranus, the starry sky. He was her equal in vastness, covering her completely, an immense overarching dome filled with countless twinkling stars. Uranus was not just a celestial body, but a powerful, living entity, the personification of the heavens above. He was the consort to his mother Gaia, in the first great union that initiated further creation. Imagine the vast sky descending to embrace the earth, a constant, boundless connection that would bring forth an entire lineage of powerful beings. Gaia also gave birth to Pontus, the sea, a restless and immense body of water, the primordial embodiment of the ocean. These 3, Gaia, Uranus, and Pontus, formed the foundational trinity of the physical world, representing the 3 great realms of existence. From the majestic union of Gaia and Uranus came forth the first generation of truly formidable and distinct beings, the Titans. Oceanus, the eldest Titan, the immense river that was believed to encircle the entire world, both a deity and a geographical feature, the source of all fresh water. Tethys, his consort, a titaness of the fresh water, streams, springs, and nurturing the rivers of the world. He later fathered the sun, moon, and dawn. Kus, the titan of the inquisitive mind, intellect, and prophecy, often associated with the axis of the heavens around which the stars revolved. Phoebe, the titaness of bright intellect, oracular prophecy, and the moon, often associated with the oracle of Delphi before Apollo. Crius, the titan of constellations, associated with the pillar of the south, a less prominent figure, but still part of the foundational 12. Hyperion, the titan of light, embodying heavenly light and observation, and later the father of Prometheus, Epimetheus, Atlas, and Menetius, figures crucial to later myths. They, the titaness of sight and shining light, often associated with the gleam of gold and silver. He was associated with time, often depicted with a sickle. She was also a prophetess, known for her wisdom and counsel. Iapetus, the titan of mortality, one who pierces, sometimes associated with craftsmanship. Mnemosyne, the titaness of memory, and mother of the muses, with Zeus, embodying the power of remembrance and the arts. Themis, the titaness of divine law, order, justice, and custom. Rhea, the titaness of fertility, motherhood, and the mountains, often equated with Cybele, and importantly, the mother of the Olympian gods. Cronus, the youngest of the Titans, but the most cunning, ambitious, and ultimately the most pivotal in the overthrow of his father. Beyond the Titans, Gaia and Uranus also gave birth to other, more monstrous children who inspired fear and aversion in their father. These were the 3 Cyclopes, Brontes, Sterops, and Arges. These were truly monstrous beings, each possessing 100 hands and 50 heads. Their immense strength was beyond measure, capable of tearing apart mountains and hurling enormous boulders with effortless ease. Their very appearance was horrifying, an embodiment of raw, untamed power. Uranus, consumed by paranoia and a cruel nature, could not bear the sight of these immense and powerful children. Fearing their strength and potential to challenge his rule, he immediately imprisoned them, along with the Cyclopes, deep within the dark, suffocating depths of Gaia's womb, within Tartarus itself. This act caused Gaia immense pain and suffering, a continuous agony as her own beloved children were trapped within her very being. She groaned and writhed in discomfort, her heart heavy with sorrow and anger at Uranus's tyrannical cruelty. They were colossal, powerful beings, each with a single, immense eye in the middle of their forehead. They were master craftsmen, smiths of incredible skill, capable of forging divine weapons of immense power. Their raw strength and formidable appearance, however, terrified their father. Uranus, in his tyrannical and fearful nature, saw them as threats to his power. Perhaps because of their formidable abilities and independent spirit, he deemed them too monstrous and too powerful to be allowed to roam freely. Even more terrifying in Uranus's eyes were the three Hecatonchires, Briareus, Cottus, and Gaius. Gaia, racked with pain and enraged by Uranus's unjust imprisonment of her children, sought vengeance. She appealed to her remaining children, the mighty Titans, to rise up against their oppressive father. She yearned for freedom for her tormented offspring and for a release from the continuous agony Uranus inflicted upon her. But the Titans, immense and powerful as they were, hesitated. They feared their father's might and the consequences of challenging the primordial ruler of the cosmos. All that is, except for Cronus, the youngest and most ambitious of the Titan's sons. He was filled with a simmering resentment towards his father's tyranny and a growing hunger for power. He saw an opportunity in his mother's pain and her desperate plea. Gaia, with immense effort, forged a mighty weapon from the very iron within her body, a sharp, gleaming adamantine sickle. This was no ordinary tool, but a divine instrument capable of cutting through the essence of a god. From the drops of Uranus's divine blood that fell upon Gaia, the fertile earth, sprang forth several powerful and terrifying beings. These included the Erinyes, also known as the Furies. These were three fearsome goddesses of vengeance, Ectomegira, with snakes for hair and winged bodies. They were relentless and merciless pursuers of those who committed heinous crimes, especially patricide, perjury, and breaking oaths, ensuring that no grave offense went unpunished. Their very existence was a constant reminder of the horrific act that brought them into being, a living manifestation of divine retribution. She presented this formidable weapon to Cronus and entrusted him with the grave task of overthrowing his father. Cronus, seeing his chance to seize ultimate power and driven by a complex mix of ambition, a desire to relieve his mother's suffering, and perhaps a touch of filial duty, accepted the heavy burden. He devised a plan, waiting for the opportune moment, when Uranus, unaware of the brewing rebellion, descended from the heavens to unite with Gaia. He found himself ambushed. Cronus, hidden in wait, sprang forth with the adamantine sickle. In a swift, brutal, and horrifying act, he castrated his father, severing Uranus's generative power and ending his oppressive reign forever. This act was not just a physical mutilation, it was a symbolic shattering of the old order, a violent but necessary step that cleaved the primordial connection between sky and earth. The consequences of Uranus's castration were immense and far-reaching, shaping subsequent generations of deities and the very landscape of the world. Also born from Uranus's spilled blood were the mighty giants, colossal beings of immense strength, often depicted as monstrous and aggressive. They were destined to later challenge the Olympian gods in a titanic war known as the Gigantomachy. Their birth from Uranus's blood connected them to the primordial power of the sky. Additionally, the Malaya, the ash tree nymphs, beautiful and graceful spirits associated with ash trees, whose wood was used for spears, also emerged from these sacred drops. But perhaps the most astonishing and beautiful birth from this violent act was that of Aphrodite, the goddess of love, beauty, pleasure, and procreation. From the severed genitals of Uranus, which Cronus cast into the sea, a miraculous foam gathered around them. From this radiant foam, fully formed and exquisitely beautiful, emerged Aphrodite, rising from the waves near the island of Cythera or Cyprus. Her birth, born from violence and purity, symbolized the complex and often contradictory nature of love and beauty itself. Despite his powerful reign and the apparent tranquility of the Golden Age, Cronus was haunted by a dark shadow, a terrifying prophecy. This curse was uttered by his dying father, Uranus, in his final moments of agony and wrath. As each of his children was born to Rhea, he would immediately seize and swallow them whole, devouring them moments after their birth. He swallowed Hestia, the goddess of the hearth, Demeter, the goddess of agriculture, Hera, who would later become his queen, Hades, the future lord of the underworld, and Poseidon, the future ruler of the seas. Imagine Rhea's utter heartbreak and despair, giving birth to her beloved infants, only to witness their immediate consumption by their own father, their cries silenced as they disappeared into his cavernous maw. Her spirit was crushed by this repeated tragedy, her heart a constant ache of loss and fear. Each birth became a torment, a cruel cycle of creation and consumption, leaving her without her children and filled with desperate anguish. The prophecy foretold that Cronus, just as he had overthrown his own father, would in turn be overthrown by one of his own children. They, understanding the endless cycle of violence and the burden of such a prophecy, advised Rhea on a cunning plan to deceive Cronus. They wished to see their grandchild safe and the oppressive reign of Cronus ended, hoping for a new and more just order. Following their counsel, when Rhea was about to give birth to her sixth child, she secretly traveled to the remote and mystical island of Crete, a land known for its hidden caves and wild, untamed beauty. There, in the deep, secluded cave of Mount Ida, she gave birth to her son, Zeus, in secret, away from Cronus's watchful and hungry eyes. The birth was quiet, urgent, and filled with a desperate hope for the future. This chilling prediction, echoing his own act of patricide, consumed Cronus with a suffocating paranoia. He became obsessed with preventing his fate, gripped by an irrational fear that history would repeat itself. His deep-seated insecurity and fear of losing power transformed him from a liberator into a tyrant, mirroring the very cruelty he had rebelled against. He would take extreme and horrific measures to ensure his continued dominion, convinced that by destroying his lineage, he could secure his throne forever, to thwart the prophecy and secure his reign. Cronus devised a monstrous plan that would bring immense sorrow to Rhea and profound suffering to his own family. Desperate to save her last child from this horrific fate, Rhea sought solace and counsel from her own parents, Gaia and Uranus, despite their previous suffering. To trick Cronus, Rhea performed a crucial deception. She wrapped a large stone in swaddling clothes, carefully making it resemble a newborn infant. When she returned to Cronus, feigning calm, she presented him with this swaddled stone. He was filled with a fierce determination to free them and exact retribution against his tyrannical father. Zeus, disguising himself as Cronus's cupbearer or a humble servant, managed to administer this powerful drink to his unsuspecting father. Cronus, unaware of the deception, drank the potion and soon became violently ill. The emetic worked with devastating effect, causing Cronus to vomit up everything he had swallowed, starting with the stone he had believed to be his last child, followed by the 5 Olympian siblings, Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon. To Zeus's relief and Cronus's horror, they emerged not as infants, but fully grown, powerful, and utterly furious, ready to join their younger brother in a fight for freedom and revenge against their oppressive father. Their reunion was a powerful moment, solidifying their common cause against the Titan ruler. He understood the cycle of violence that had plagued his family line, and he was resolved to break it. To achieve his monumental task, Zeus sought assistance and guidance. He found a crucial ally in Metis, the wise Titaness of counsel, prudence, and cunning intelligence. Metis possessed ancient knowledge and foresight, and she understood the delicate balance of power. With Metis's wisdom, Zeus concocted a cunning plan to force Cronus to disgorge his swallowed children, a task that required both divine power and strategic thinking. Cronus, consumed by his paranoia and believing he was devouring his last potential rival, swallowed the stone without hesitation, convinced that he had finally averted the dreaded prophecy and secured his eternal rule. Meanwhile, the infant Zeus was secretly spirited away to be raised in hiding on Crete. The legendary horn of Amalthea later became the cornucopia, the horn of plenty, a symbol of inexhaustible bounty and nourishment, a testament to the life-giving care that sustained the future king of the gods. The Curetes, mythical warriors, would dance and clang their spears together near Zeus's hiding place, creating a loud din to mask the baby's cries, ensuring that Cronus would never hear him. Zeus grew up powerful and robust, unaware of his true destiny for a time, yet brimming with latent divine energy, shielded from his father's tyranny by the very earth that gave him life. As Zeus matured into a powerful young god, his strength and intelligence grew, and eventually he learned of his true origins and the terrible fate that had befallen his siblings. Metis provided Zeus with a potent emetic, a powerful potion designed to induce vomiting in even a god. Thus began the epic and cataclysmic conflict known as the Titanomachy, the great war between the newly freed Olympian gods and the elder Titans. This was no mere skirmish. It was a cosmic struggle that shook the very foundations of the universe, a defining war that would determine the ultimate rulers of reality. The young Olympian gods, led by the formidable Zeus, quickly formed alliances to bolster their strength against the powerful Titans. Crucially, Zeus journeyed to Tartarus, the deep abyss, where his monstrous uncles, the Cyclopes and the Hecatonchires, had been imprisoned by Uranus. Recognizing their immense power and skill, Zeus freed them from their suffering and eternal confinement. Their gratitude was immense, and they pledged their unwavering loyalty to him. The Cyclopes, masters of metallurgy and divine craftsmanship, wasted no time in forging powerful, unique weapons for the Olympians, weapons that would turn the tide of the war. For Zeus, they crafted the mighty thunderbolt, a weapon of unparalleled destructive power, capable of unleashing bolts of pure lightning and thunder upon his foes. For Poseidon, they forged the mighty trident, a 3-pronged spear, capable of stirring the seas, causing earthquakes, and commanding the very waters of the world. And for Hades, they fashioned the cap of darkness, or helmet of invisibility, which rendered its wearer unseen by gods and mortals alike, a powerful tool for stealth and surprise. These divine armaments provided the Olympians with a critical advantage, giving them powers that the Titans could not match. The Hecatonchires, with their 100 hands and 50 heads, were equally formidable allies. Their sheer physical power was staggering. They could rip up mountains and hurl enormous rocks with incredible force, creating a barrage of devastating projectiles that rained down upon the Titans, overwhelming them with raw, unceasing might. The war raged for 10 long, brutal years. The heavens roared, the earth trembled violently, and the seas churned with unprecedented fury as the immense powers of the two factions clashed. Lightning flashed ceaselessly, thunderclaps echoed across the cosmos, and the ground split open with the force of divine blows. The Titans, led by Cronus, fought fiercely, desperate to retain their dominion, unleashing their ancient, primordial powers. But the strategic brilliance of Zeus, combined with the unparalleled power of his thunderbolt, Poseidon's trident, Hades' invisibility, and the overwhelming, relentless force of the Hecatonchires, slowly but surely began to turn the tide. The Cyclopes tirelessly continued to forge more thunderbolts for Zeus, ensuring he had an endless supply of his most potent weapon, allowing him to unleash devastating barrages of celestial fire upon his adversaries, gradually breaking their resolve and weakening their immense power. Finally, after a decade of relentless and devastating conflict, the Olympians emerged decisively victorious. The Titans, who had fought against them, including Cronus himself, were utterly defeated, their ancient power broken by the might of the younger gods. They were cast down, not into the ordinary underworld, but into Tartarus, the deepest and darkest part of the abyss, the very prison from which Zeus had freed the Cyclopes and Hecatonchires. Here, in this bottomless pit, the defeated Titans were imprisoned forever, bound by unbreakable chains, their immense power rendered useless by their eternal confinement. The colossal Hecatonchires, as a reward for their loyalty and service in the war, were appointed as the eternal, vigilant guards of Tartarus, ensuring that the imprisoned Titans would never again rise to challenge the new order. This monumental victory marked the definitive end of the Titans' chaotic and often tyrannical reign and ushered in a new era, the age of the Olympian gods. The cosmos was finally ordered, its new rulers poised to establish their domains and preside over a more structured, albeit still tumultuous, world. This triumph of the Olympians symbolized the triumph of order over primordial chaos, a fundamental shift in the cosmic balance, laying the groundwork for the rich tapestry of myths and legends that would follow. The Olympian pantheon, rulers of the new world with the monumental victory of the Titanomachy secured, and the elder Titans vanquished and imprisoned in the abyssal darkness of Tartarus. A new era dawned upon the cosmos. The victorious young gods, having fought valiantly under the astute leadership of Zeus, now ascended to their rightful place as the supreme rulers of the universe. His position was secured by his cunning strategy in overthrowing Cronus and his overwhelming power in the Titanomachy. He was the preeminent god of the sky, his dominion encompassing the vast expanse above the earth. With this domain came control over the weather, making him the god of lightning, thunder, and rain. When Zeus hurled his thunderbolt, his signature and most formidable weapon, meticulously forged by the grateful Cyclopes, the very heavens trembled with awesome power. The sky split open with blinding flashes, and the earth reverberated with the deafening roar of thunder, serving as an unmistakable declaration of his supreme authority and immeasurable might. He was also the embodiment of divine law, order, and justice, often acting as the ultimate arbiter in disputes that arose among the gods themselves, as well as between gods and mortals. He was the protector of oaths, the champion of hospitality, and the enforcer of moral boundaries. However, despite his role as the upholder of cosmic order, Zeus was notoriously known for his insatiable appetites and his numerous, often scandalous, love affairs. These many liaisons were not confined to goddesses. He also pursued and had children with a multitude of mortal women, as well as nymphs and other divine beings. These countless dalliances led to incredibly complex, often tumultuous, and endlessly dramatic family dynamics on Mount Olympus, perpetually fueling the legendary jealousy of his queen, Hera. This jealousy, in turn, sparked countless mythological narratives, where Hera's wrath pursued Zeus's lovers and their offspring, leading to tragic consequences and epic quests. Each of these stories, whether about his power or his personal failings, unveiled a different, intricate facet of his powerful yet deeply flawed character, making him one of the most compelling figures in all of mythology. His rule was a delicate balance of power, constantly challenged by internal strife and external threats, but ultimately enduring due to his unparalleled strength and strategic mind. Their magnificent new home was Mount Olympus, a majestic and ethereal peak that pierced the clouds, rising far above the mortal realm in Greece. It was a realm of unparalleled beauty and grandeur, where divine palaces, crafted from gleaming gold, shining silver, and precious stones, stood testament to their power and glory. Hephaestus, the divine smith, painstakingly built these residences, ensuring they befitted the new rulers of the cosmos. This assembly of powerful deities became universally known as the Olympian pantheon, and their collective decisions, passions, and conflicts would shape the destinies of gods, mortals, and the very fabric of existence itself for millennia to come. Each god and goddess took on specific, well-defined roles and domains, presiding over different aspects of life and the natural world. From the vast expanses of the sky and the turbulent depths of the sea to the tender realms of love, the profound wisdom of knowledge and the brutal chaos of war, their intertwined lives formed a complex, vibrant tapestry woven with threads of immense power, volatile passions, simmering jealousies, and epic adventures, vividly reflecting the multifaceted and often contradictory nature of both divinity and humanity. They were not flawless beings. Their stories are replete with both awe-inspiring virtues and deeply ingrained flaws, mirroring the struggles, triumphs, and moral complexities inherent in human experience, which made them remarkably relatable, even in their divine majesty and omnipotence. Their narratives provided not only entertainment, but also a rich source of moral lessons, cautionary tales, and explanations for the natural phenomena that surrounded the ancient Greeks. At the very pinnacle of this newly established pantheon sat Zeus, the formidable youngest son of Cronus and Rhea, and the undisputed king of the gods. The mightiest of Zeus's brothers and the ruler of the boundless seas was Poseidon, the venerable god of the sea, earthquakes, storms, and horses. His iconic symbol and weapon was the mighty trident forged for him by the Cyclopes, a formidable three-pronged spear that allowed him to command the vast oceans. With a mere flick of his wrist, Poseidon could stir the calmest waters into raging tempests, unleashing monstrous waves that swallowed ships whole, or he could calm the most violent storms with equal ease. He was also responsible for earthquakes, often striking his trident into the earth when angered, causing the very ground to tremble and crack, hence his epithet, Earthshaker. His temperament was as unpredictable and volatile as the oceans he ruled. He could be calm and benevolent, granting safe passage to sailors and providing bountiful fish. But he could also be quick to anger, unleashing destructive forces upon those who offended him. His anger was legendary, capable of causing widespread devastation. Poseidon also held a unique connection to horses. He was credited with their creation, either striking the earth with his trident to bring forth the first horse, or mating with a Gorgon to produce Pegasus, the winged horse. This connection made him a patron of horsemanship and chariot racing. One famous myth recounts his contest with Athena for patronage of the city of Athens. Poseidon offered a spring of salt water, or, in some versions, the first horse, while Athena offered the olive tree. The Athenians chose Athena's gift, leading to a lasting rivalry between the two powerful deities. His love affairs, though not as numerous as Zeus's, were equally passionate and sometimes tragic, including his union with the Nereid Amphitrite, who became his queen, and various other nymphs and mortal women, fathering monstrous creatures like the Cyclops, Polyphemus in some traditions. Brother to Zeus and Poseidon, and the eldest son of Cronus, was Hades, the formidable and often misunderstood god of the underworld and the ruler of the dead. Unlike his brothers, Hades did not reside on Mount Olympus. His throne was in the shadowy depths beneath the earth, in the realm known as the underworld, or sometimes referred to as Hades itself. He was also known as the Wealthy One, or Pluto, as he presided over the precious metals and jewels hidden within the earth, as well as the souls of the deceased, and his fearsome three-headed dog, Cerberus, who guarded the entrance to the underworld, preventing the dead from leaving and the living from entering without permission. Hades was a grim and unyielding god, a stern but just ruler, not inherently evil, but rather somber and inexorable, reflecting the finality of death. He was rarely seen on the surface world and was often invoked with apprehension, as speaking his name too loudly was believed to attract his attention. His most famous myth involves his abduction of Persephone, the beautiful daughter of his sister Demeter. Hades fell deeply in love with Persephone, and with Zeus's tacit approval, carried her away to his dark realm to be his queen. This act plunged Demeter into profound grief, leading to a cosmic crisis and the creation of the seasons, as Demeter withheld her blessings from the earth. Hades was fiercely possessive of his domain and his queen, rarely leaving the underworld. Despite his terrifying reputation, he maintained order in his realm, ensuring that the souls of the dead found their proper place, either in the Elysian fields for the virtuous, the Asphodel meadows for the ordinary, or Tartarus for the wicked. One of the most poignant and vital goddesses of the Olympian pantheon was Demeter, the revered goddess of agriculture, harvest, fertility, and sacred law. She was Zeus's older sister and the mother of Persephone, and her presence was essential for the prosperity of the mortal world. Demeter was a nurturing and benevolent deity, deeply connected to the earth and the cycle of life, growth, and rebirth. Her symbols included ears of wheat, a cornucopia filled with bountiful produce, and often a torch, representing her tireless search for Persephone. She taught humanity the art of cultivating the land, of sowing seeds and harvesting crops, thus lifting mortals from a primitive existence and allowing for settled civilization. Her greatest joy and the very essence of her being revolved around her beloved daughter, Persephone, also known as Kore, the maiden. The bond between mother and daughter was unbreakable, a testament to the primal force of maternal love. When Hades abducted Persephone, Demeter was plunged into inconsolable grief. She ceased her divine duties, refusing to allow anything to grow on earth. The fields withered, crops failed, and a devastating famine swept across the mortal world, threatening to annihilate all of humanity. Demeter's grief was so profound that it manifested as a cosmic winter, a period of desolation and barrenness. She roamed the earth in despair, disguised as an old woman, searching tirelessly for her lost daughter. Her sorrow was a powerful force that affected all living things, demonstrating the critical interdependence between the gods and the mortal realm. Zeus, seeing the impending doom of humanity, eventually intervened. He sent Hermes to the underworld to demand Persephone's return. However, because Persephone had eaten a few pomegranate seeds while in the underworld, she was bound to spend a portion of each year in Hades' realm, a fundamental law that could not be broken. A compromise was reached. Persephone would spend 2/3 of the year on Earth with her mother, and 1/3 of the year with Hades in the underworld. This agreement is the profound mythical explanation for the changing seasons. When Persephone is with Demeter, the earth blossoms with life and warmth, bringing spring and summer. When Persephone returns to the underworld, Demeter grieves, and the earth becomes barren and cold, ushering in autumn and winter. This myth not only explained natural cycles, but also formed the basis of the Eleusinian mysteries, secret religious rites celebrated in Eleusis that promised initiates a blessed afterlife, centered around the themes of death, rebirth, and the profound connection between life and the earth. Among the primordial children of Cronus and Rhea, there was also Hestia, the eldest daughter, and a goddess of profound purity and quiet strength. Hestia was the revered goddess of the hearth, home, family, and domesticity. Her birth was unconventional. Metis, the Titaness of wisdom, was pregnant with Athena by Zeus. A prophecy foretold that Metis would first bear a daughter of immense wisdom, and then a son who would eventually overthrow Zeus. To avert this, Zeus swallowed Metis whole. However, the prophecy still manifested. Metis continued to develop within Zeus, and Athena eventually burst forth from Zeus's skull, fully grown, clad in armor, and wielding a spear amidst a cry that shook the heavens. This unique birth symbolized her unparalleled wisdom, her direct connection to Zeus's intellect, and her inherent martial prowess. Athena was distinct from her volatile brother, Ares, who reveled in the bloodshed and chaos of war. Athena championed strategic warfare, defensive battles, and the just cause. She embodied tactical brilliance, cunning, and intelligent planning, often advising heroes on how to outwit their enemies rather than simply overpower them. Unlike her more flamboyant and often tumultuous siblings, Hestia was a calm, gentle, and serene deity who chose a life of eternal virginity, rejecting the advances of both Poseidon and Apollo. She embodied the sanctity of the home, the warmth of the family fire, and the comforting security of domestic life. Her primary symbol was the eternal flame of the hearth, which burned in every household, every temple, and especially in the Prytanium of every Greek city, symbolizing the very heart of the community. Hestia received the first offering in any sacrifice to the gods, a testament to her foundational importance. She literally embodied the physical and spiritual center of the household and the community. She rarely left Mount Olympus, preferring to tend to the sacred flame that burned in the gods' communal hearth. She was known for her unwavering kindness, her peaceful demeanor, and her lack of involvement in the dramatic squabbles and vengeful acts that often characterized her Olympian relatives. Hestia represented stability, continuity, and the quiet dignity of domestic life, a comforting and essential presence that allowed for the flourishing of human civilization and the sacred bonds of family. Her presence ensured that the home was a sanctuary, a place of peace and safety, and she was invoked at the beginning and end of meals. Blessings upon the home and at the start of any new venture to ensure its stability. She was the anchor of the divine and mortal realms, a steadfast guardian of core values. From Zeus's head, in a unique and astonishing birth, sprang Athena, the formidable goddess of wisdom, strategic warfare, handicrafts, and heroic endeavor. Athena was also the patroness of handicrafts, particularly weaving and pottery and skilled artistry. Her symbols included the owl, representing wisdom, and the aegis, a shield or breastplate adorned with the head of the Gorgon Medusa, which instilled terror in her enemies. She was a virgin goddess, fiercely independent and dedicated to her principles. His pursuit of Daphne, who transformed into a laurel tree to escape him, resulted in the laurel becoming his sacred plant. He inflicted plague upon the Achaeans during the Trojan War in response to Agamemnon's disrespect towards his priest. He also punished those who challenged his musical prowess, famously flaying the satyr Marsyas for daring to compete against him. Apollo represented the civilizing forces of art, reason, and divine law, contrasting with the wilder, more primal aspects of some other gods. He brought light, both literally and metaphorically, driving away darkness and ignorance. His role as a healer was crucial. He taught mortals the art of medicine, and his son Asclepius became the god of healing. Apollo was a complex deity, capable of both immense benevolence and terrible wrath, embodying the dual nature of light and shadow, creation and destruction that exists within the cosmos. His influence permeated every aspect of Greek life, from healing the sick to inspiring epic poetry and guiding the destinies of kings and empires. Through his oracular pronouncements, she was a staunch protector of heroes, offering her counsel and aid to figures like Odysseus, Perseus, and Heracles. One of her most famous myths involved her competition with Poseidon for the patronage of Athens. Poseidon offered a saltwater spring, or the horse, but Athena offered the olive tree, symbolizing peace, prosperity, and wisdom. The Athenians chose her gift, and the city was named after her, with the Parthenon, her grand temple, built on the Acropolis in her honor. Athena was a paragon of reason and civilization, a goddess who brought order and intelligence to both the battlefield and the workshop, shaping the very fabric of Greek society and inspiring intellectual and artistic pursuits. Her strategic mind and unwavering support for justice made her a revered figure among both gods and mortals, representing the highest ideals of thought and action. Born from Zeus and Leto on the island of Delos, Apollo was the radiant god of music, poetry, light, healing, archery, and prophecy. He was a deity of immense beauty, harmony, and order, representing the ideal of youthful perfection. His symbols included the lyre, the bow and arrow, and the laurel wreath, which became sacred to him after his unrequited love for the nymph Daphne. Apollo was the leader of the Muses, inspiring artists and poets with his divine melodies and eloquent verses. He also possessed unparalleled skill in archery, his arrows capable of bringing both plague and healing. Most significantly, Apollo was associated with the Oracle of Delphi, the most famous and influential oracle in the ancient world. Through the Pythia, his priestess, Apollo delivered prophecies and divine guidance to mortals seeking answers to their most pressing questions. His pronouncements, though sometimes cryptic, were considered infallible and vital for political and personal decisions. Apollo's myths often explored themes of love, loss, and the consequences of hubris. Apollo's twin sister, also born to Zeus and Leto on Delos, was Artemis, the fierce and independent goddess of the hunt, wilderness, wild animals, childbirth, and protector of virgins. Artemis was a powerful and unyielding deity, embodying the wild, untamed aspects of nature. She was a skilled archer, her silver bow and arrows swift and deadly, capable of striking down both beasts and mortals who incurred her wrath. Her symbols included the bow, quiver of arrows, hunting dogs, and the crescent moon. Artemis chose a life of eternal virginity, fiercely guarding her independence and purity. And she was a formidable protector of other virgins and young women. She roamed the untouched forests and mountains, accompanied by her retinue of nymphs, pursuing game with unmatched skill. Artemis was a paradox, a bringer of both life and death. She presided over childbirth, offering assistance and protection to women in labor. Yet she could also bring sudden death to women through her arrows, sometimes referred to as the gentle arrows. Her myths often highlighted her unwavering dedication to her sacred vows and her swift, often brutal, justice against those who transgressed against her or her domain. A famous example is the hunter Actaeon, who accidentally stumbled upon Artemis bathing. For this transgression, he was transformed into a stag and torn apart by his own hunting dogs. She also played a significant role in the Trojan War, often siding with the Trojans, whose patron god Apollo supported. Artemis represented the wild, unbridled spirit of nature, the strength and autonomy of women, and the harsh realities of survival in the wilderness. Her reverence for nature and her fierce protection of the innocent made her a respected, though often feared, deity. Her devotion to purity and her formidable hunting prowess symbolized a powerful, untamed force, a vital counterbalance to the more social and domestic aspects of the pantheon. The epitome of beauty, love, and desire was Aphrodite, the captivating goddess of love, beauty, pleasure, and procreation. Her birth, as recounted earlier, was unique and astonishing. She emerged fully formed and exquisitely beautiful from the sea foam that gathered around the castrated genitals of Uranus. Drifting ashore near the islands of Cythera or Cyprus, her very presence radiated charm and allure, causing flowers to bloom and animals to pair. She held immense power over both gods and mortals, inspiring irresistible passion and desire wherever she went. Her symbols included doves, swans, myrtle trees, roses, and the scallop shell from which she often arose. Despite her ethereal beauty and divine allure, Aphrodite was, ironically, married to Hephaestus, the lame and often gruff god of blacksmiths, a union often seen as a mismatch. However, Aphrodite was famously unfaithful, most notably engaging in a passionate affair with Ares, the god of war, a relationship that produced several offspring, including Eros, Deimos, Phobos, and harmonium. Her affairs often led to dramatic consequences, such as the elaborate trap set by Hephaestus to expose her and Ares. Aphrodite played a pivotal role in the Trojan War, as it was her promise of the most beautiful woman in the world to Paris that instigated the entire conflict, thus showing her immense, if sometimes destructive, power over human affairs and love. She was also a protector of sailors, due to her birth from the sea, and a goddess who brought joy and pleasure to life. While often depicted as vain and manipulative, she also represented the powerful, life-forming force of love and fertility, essential for the continuation of life. Her influence was undeniable, weaving itself into the fabric of relationships, art, and the very concept of attraction, making her one of the most celebrated and complex goddesses. The embodiment of raw aggression and the brutal chaos of battle was Ares, the formidable god of war, violence, and bloodshed. He was the son of Zeus and Hera, but unlike his sister Athena, who represented strategic warfare and justice, Ares reveled in the savage, destructive aspects of conflict. He loved the clang of armor, the cries of the wounded, and the sheer fury of combat. His symbols were the spear, shield, helmet, and sometimes a dog or a boar, animals associated with aggression. Ares was often depicted as impulsive, hot-headed, and lacking the strategic cunning of Athena, often rushing into battle without forethought, driven purely by a thirst for violence. He was not widely admired by the other gods, including his own father, Zeus, who famously expressed his disdain for Ares's bloodthirsty nature. Despite being a god of war, Ares was not always victorious in battle. He was famously wounded by Diomedes, a mortal hero during the Trojan War, with Athena's aid. He also often suffered humiliating defeats. His most famous personal story involved his illicit and passionate affair with Aphrodite, the goddess of love. This affair, though scandalous, was a recurring motif in Olympian drama, highlighting the powerful, intoxicating allure of love even for the most brutal of gods. Their union, despite the mockery it sometimes drew, symbolized the potent connection between love and conflict, attraction and aggression. Ares embodied the dangerous and destructive side of human nature, the primal urge for violence and combat. He was invoked by warriors seeking strength and ruthlessness in battle, but he was rarely revered for justice or wisdom. His presence on Mount Olympus was a constant reminder of the destructive forces that even divine beings could embody. A stark contrast to the order and intellect represented by other gods. The divine craftsman, Hephaestus, was the god of blacksmiths, artisans, fire, volcanoes, and technology. His birth story varies. Some myths state he was born from Hera alone, in retaliation for Zeus giving birth to Athena from his head, while others claim he was the son of Zeus and Hera. Hephaestus was unique among the Olympians due to his physical appearance. He was lame, having been cast from Mount Olympus either by Hera for his deformity or by Zeus for intervening in a quarrel between his parents. Despite his limp, Hephaestus was a master artisan, unrivaled in skill and ingenuity. His forge, often located beneath volcanoes, roared with immense heat, and from his hands sprang miraculous creations of unparalleled beauty and utility. His symbols included a hammer, anvil, tongs, and the forge fire itself. Hephaestus crafted the magnificent palaces on Mount Olympus, the thunderbolts for Zeus, the chariot of Helios, the armor of Achilles, and countless other divine artifacts and ingenious automatons. He was also responsible for creating the chains that bound Prometheus. He was the son of Zeus and the nymph Maia, born in a cave on Mount Cyllene. From his very infancy, Hermes displayed incredible cleverness and mischievousness. On the day of his birth, he famously stole Apollo's sacred cattle, a prank that showcased his ingenuity and quick wit, but also led to his invention of the lyre from a tortoiseshell to appease Apollo, solidifying his role as a patron of music. His most recognizable symbols are his winged sandals, his winged traveler's hat, and the caduceus, a staff entwined with two snakes, symbolizing his role as a herald. His most famous personal story involves his marriage to Aphrodite, a union orchestrated by Zeus to prevent conflict among the gods vying for her hand. Despite Aphrodite's infidelity with Ares, Hephaestus was a diligent and largely benevolent god, respected for his craftsmanship and his honest labor. He was the antithesis of the more warlike or promiscuous gods, representing the value of hard work, skill, and creative genius. His story often highlights themes of rejection and resilience, as he overcame his physical disadvantage to become an indispensable and highly respected member of the pantheon, proving that true power lay not just in brute strength, but in skill, intellect, and the ability to create. His connection to fire and volcanoes made him a powerful, if sometimes overlooked, force of nature. The swiftest of the gods, and arguably the most cunning, was Hermes, the agile messenger of the gods, god of travelers, trade, commerce, thieves, orators, and athletes. Hermes served as Zeus's personal messenger, swiftly traversing the realms between gods, mortals, and the underworld. He was the guide for souls to the afterlife, leading the deceased to Hades' realm. He was also the patron of boundaries and transitions, invoked by travelers embarking on journeys and by merchants in their dealings. His quick mind and eloquent speech made him the god of rhetoric and persuasion. Despite his occasional mischievousness and association with thieves, Hermes was generally a benevolent and helpful god, often acting as a mediator and diplomat. He aided many heroes, including Perseus and Odysseus. Hermes represented communication, adaptability, and the power of intellect and charm. His presence allowed for the flow of information, goods, and souls throughout the cosmos, making him an indispensable link between the divine and mortal worlds. His unique blend of cleverness, speed, and persuasive ability made him a truly versatile and fascinating figure among the Olympians. The final major Olympian god to be admitted to the pantheon was Dionysus, the vibrant and enigmatic god of wine, revelry, fertility, ecstasy, madness, and theater. His birth was extraordinary and traumatic, making him unique even among the gods. He was the son of Zeus and the mortal princess Semele. Hera, consumed by her typical jealousy, tricked Semele into asking Zeus to reveal his true divine form, a sight no mortal could survive. Semele was consumed by Zeus's thunderbolts, but Zeus managed to rescue the unborn Dionysus from her ashes and sewed him into his own thigh, carrying him to term. Thus, Dionysus was twice born, a testament to his unusual nature and his connection to both divine and mortal realms. His symbols included a thyrsus, grapevines, ivy, a drinking cup, and leopards, or tigers. Dionysus represented liberation, breaking down social constraints and embracing the wild, untamed aspects of human nature. His cult involved ecstatic rituals, often in the wilderness, where his followers, the Maenads, would engage in frenzied dances and communal revelry, sometimes involving acts of ritual madness. He was the god who taught humanity the cultivation of grapevines and the art of winemaking, bringing both joy and intoxication. Dionysus also held a profound connection to the art of theater. Ancient Greek drama originated from festivals in his honor, celebrating the transformative power of performance and storytelling. He was a god of contradiction, capable of bringing ecstatic joy and creative inspiration, but also madness, violence, and profound delusion. Unlike the other Olympians, who often remained aloof from humanity, Dionysus often traveled among mortals, spreading his cult and punishing those who resisted his worship. His myths explore themes of divine madness, transformation, and the blurring lines between civilization and wildness. His later admission to Olympus, sometimes replacing Hestia, signified the integration of new, more chthonic and ecstatic forces into the established order of the Olympian pantheon, reflecting the dynamic and evolving nature of Greek religious belief. He offered an alternative path to divinity, one rooted in experience, emotion, and the transcendent power of intoxication and artistic expression. These 13 gods, including Hestia, who technically gave up her seat for Dionysus, but is often counted as one of the original 12, along with other significant deities, like Hermes' son Pan-Hecate, and the Muses, formed the intricate and dynamic tapestry of the Olympian pantheon. Their stories were not merely entertaining tales. They were fundamental to the ancient Greek understanding of the world, human nature, morality, and the divine. Each god embodied specific forces of nature, human emotions, or societal functions, providing explanations for phenomena, justifying social structures, and offering moral guidance through their triumphs and failures. The relationships between them, their alliances, rivalries, love affairs, and feuds, created a rich, dramatic narrative that reflected the complexities of human society itself. The Olympians, in their collective rule, brought order to the cosmos that had been established after the chaos of the primordial era and the violent reign of the Titans. Zeus, as their king, established a form of divine governance, though it was often challenged and rarely perfectly harmonious. Their decisions affected the lives of mortals directly, from sending blessings of good harvests and favorable winds to unleashing plagues, wars, and natural disasters as punishment for impiety or hubris. Mortals engaged with these gods through prayer, sacrifice, and the establishment of temples and festivals, seeking their favor and striving to avoid their wrath. The Greeks believed that maintaining proper reverence and respect for the gods was crucial for a prosperous and stable life. The concept of hubris, excessive pride or arrogance that challenged the gods, was a central theme in many myths, always leading to divine retribution and serving as a powerful moral lesson for humanity. The stories of the Olympian gods provided a framework for understanding human existence, offering explanations for both the beauty and the brutality of the world. They explored universal themes such as love, hate, betrayal, loyalty, justice, revenge, ambition, sacrifice, and the eternal struggle between order and chaos. The myths were recounted in epic poems like Homer's Iliad and Odyssey, in the plays of Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides, and in the philosophical dialogues of Plato, demonstrating their pervasive influence on ancient Greek literature, art, and philosophy. Sculptors captured their idealized forms, painters depicted their dramatic encounters, and architects built grand temples in their honor. The Olympian pantheon became more than just a collection of deities. It was a living, breathing narrative that continued to evolve and resonate throughout Greek civilization, shaping their worldview and cultural identity in profound ways. Their legacy continues to inspire and fascinate to this day, a testament to the enduring power and timeless relevance of these ancient tales, heroes and monsters, tales of mortal greatness and peril. While the Olympian gods ruled from their majestic throne on Mount Olympus, shaping the destinies of the cosmos with their divine power, the mortal realm beneath them was a stage for equally captivating dramas. It was a world teeming with extraordinary individuals, heroes, mortals or demigods imbued with immense strength, cunning intellect, unwavering courage, or divine favor. These heroes were often born from unions between gods and mortals, inheriting a spark of divinity that set them apart from ordinary men. Hera, in a malevolent attempt to destroy the infant hero, sent 2 venomous serpents into his cradle while he slept. These were no ordinary snakes. They were enormous, deadly creatures meant to suffocate and poison the tiny demigod. However, the infant Heracles, with instincts far beyond his years and strength, already far surpassing mortal limits, calmly awoke. Without hesitation or fear, he clutched the 2 serpents in his tiny hands, effortlessly strangling them, demonstrating his immense power even before he could speak his first words. This incredible feat at such a tender age immediately set him apart, signaling to all who witnessed it that this child was destined for a unique and powerful path, one fraught with both glory and immense peril, forever shadowed by Hera's unwavering enmity. Their lives were rarely peaceful. They were destined for greatness, often called upon to face impossible challenges, embark on perilous quests, and confront the terrifying creatures that lurked in the wild, untamed corners of the world. These were the monsters, ancient, often grotesque beings, remnants of a wilder, more chaotic age, or products of divine wrath and unnatural unions. They represented the forces of chaos, the primal fears of humanity, and the untamed aspects of nature. The stories of these heroes and their encounters with monsters are not merely thrilling adventures. They are profound explorations of human courage, sacrifice, ingenuity, and the relentless pursuit of destiny, often highlighting the thin line between mortality and immortality, and the enduring impact of both divine blessing and divine curse. They served as cautionary tales, inspiring legends, and foundational myths for the ancient Greeks, shaping their understanding of heroism, morality, and the world's inherent dangers and wonders. Perhaps the most renowned and celebrated of all Greek heroes, a figure whose name became synonymous with strength and enduring labor, was Heracles, known to the Romans as Hercules. His story is a testament to extraordinary power, immense suffering, and ultimate apotheosis, a mortal achieving divine status. Heracles was no ordinary man. He was the son of Zeus, the king of the gods, and Alcmene, a noble mortal queen. Zeus, ever prone to affairs, had disguised himself as Alcmene's husband, Amphitryon, to lie with her, conceiving Heracles. This divine parentage immediately marked Heracles for greatness, but also for immense tribulation. Hera, Zeus's notoriously jealous queen, hated Heracles from the moment of his conception, seeing him as a living embodiment of her husband's infidelity. Her wrath pursued him relentlessly throughout his entire life, fueling many of the trials and tragedies he faced. transforming him into a pawn in her eternal cosmic vendetta against Zeus and his illegitimate offspring. Even in his infancy, Heracles displayed his extraordinary, divinely inherited strength. As Heracles grew, his strength continued to develop to superhuman levels. He was trained by the finest teachers in Greece, mastering archery, wrestling, and other martial arts. This was no ordinary beast. It was a monstrous creature with impenetrable golden fur, immune to any mortal weapon. This was a terrifying, multi-headed serpent that dwelled in the swamps of Lerna, infamous for its poisonous breath and, more dauntingly, its regenerative ability. For every head that was cut off, 2 new ones would immediately grow back in its place. The creature also possessed 1 immortal head. Heracles, accompanied by his nephew Iolaus, confronted the beast. As Heracles chopped off a head, Iolaus, with incredible foresight, quickly cauterized the wound with a flaming torch, preventing new heads from sprouting. This strategic teamwork was crucial. Finally, Heracles severed the immortal head and buried it deep beneath a massive rock. He then dipped his arrows in the hydra's venom, making them lethally poisonous, a future weapon against many foes. It terrorized the region of Nemea, its roar shaking the very earth, preying on livestock and humans alike. Heracles first attempted to use his bow and arrow, then his bronze club, but neither could pierce the lion's hide. Realizing conventional weapons were useless, Heracles, demonstrating not only brute force but also strategic thinking, cornered the beast in its lair. He wrestled the enormous lion bare-handed, using his immense strength to choke it to death. After defeating the creature, he used its own incredibly sharp claws to skin it, and thereafter wore its impenetrable hide as armor, a fearsome cloak that made him even more formidable and served as a symbol of his first triumph. However, his life was not without tragedy, often orchestrated by Hera's cruel hand. In a fit of divine-induced madness, a terrible affliction sent upon him by the vengeful goddess, Heracles tragically lost control and, in a moment of utter delusion, killed his own wife, Megara, and their children. The grief and remorse that followed this horrific act were unbearable for Heracles. Overwhelmed by his guilt and seeking purification and atonement for his actions, he consulted the oracle of Delphi. The oracle, speaking with Apollo's voice, declared that Heracles must serve King Eurystheus of Tiryns for 12 years and complete a series of seemingly impossible tasks. These tasks, famously known as the 12 labors of Heracles, were designed by Eurystheus, a weak and cowardly man secretly manipulated by Hera with the sole intention of ending Heracles' life. Each labor was a perilous test, pushing Heracles to the absolute limits of his strength, cunning, and endurance, a path of atonement that would cement his legendary status. The first of the 12 labors was to slay the Nemean lion. The second labor pitted Heracles against the Lernaean Hydra. For his third labor, Heracles was tasked with capturing the Cyrenian hind. This was a magnificent, incredibly swift deer with golden antlers and bronze hooves, sacred to the goddess Artemis. It was an exceptionally challenging task because Heracles was forbidden to harm the creature. He pursued the hind relentlessly for an entire year across vast distances, through mountains and valleys, demonstrating his incredible endurance and patience. Finally, he managed to corner it at the Loddon River and either captured it by net or shot it with an arrow through its non-vital tendons, immobilizing it without causing injury. He then carried the hind back to Eurystheus, briefly encountering Artemis herself. to whom he respectfully explained his predicament, gaining her reluctant permission to complete his task. The fourth labor involved capturing the Erymanthian boar. This was a colossal, ferocious, wild boar that terrorized Mount Erymanthos' devastating farmlands and posing a grave threat to the local populace. The task was not to kill it, but to bring it back alive to Eurystheus, who was so terrified of the beast that he famously hid in a large bronze jar upon seeing it. Heracles, employing a clever strategy rather than just brute force, pursued the boar tirelessly, driving it higher and higher up the snow-covered slopes of the mountain until it became exhausted and trapped in a deep snowdrift. He then captured it alive in a net or by wrestling it into submission, bound it, and carried it back to Tiryns, showcasing his ingenuity and strength in controlling such a dangerous animal. The fifth labor presented a challenge of a different kind, one that tested not just strength but also endurance and tolerance for filth, cleaning the Augean stables. Augeas, the king of Elis, owned an enormous herd of cattle, and his stables had not been cleaned for 30 years, accumulating an unimaginable amount of dung and filth that spread disease throughout the land. This task was meant to be humiliating and impossible. Heracles, however, transformed it into a feat of engineering. He diverted the courses of two mighty rivers, the Alpheus and the Peneus, channeling their powerful currents through the stables. The rushing water miraculously washed away all the accumulated filth in a single day, completing the seemingly impossible task with surprising speed and efficiency, proving his intellectual prowess alongside his physical might. For his sixth labor, Heracles had to confront the Stymphalian birds. These were monstrous, man-eating birds with bronze beaks, sharp metallic feathers that they could shoot like arrows, and poisonous droppings. They lived in the dense, dark swamps near Lake Stymphalus in Arcadia, devouring crops and terrorizing the local population. Their sheer numbers made them a formidable threat. Heracles initially struggled to fight them due to their overwhelming numbers and their ability to fly. With the help of Athena, who provided him with a pair of bronze rattles forged by Hephaestus, Heracles was able to devise a solution. He climbed a nearby mountain and clashed the rattles loudly, creating an unbearable din that startled the birds into the air. As they flew up in a chaotic swarm, Heracles used his poisoned arrows, dipped in the hydra's venom, to shoot them down, slaughtering many of them and driving the rest away from the region, making the area safe once more. The seventh labor took Heracles to the island of Crete, where he was tasked with capturing the Cretan bull. This was a magnificent, fire-breathing bull that had been sent by Poseidon as a punishment to King Minos for failing to sacrifice it. The bull was now rampaging across the island, causing widespread destruction. Heracles, again demonstrating his incredible physical strength and courage, wrestled the powerful creature into submission. He captured it alive by seizing its horns and taming it, then rode it across the Aegean Sea back to the Peloponnese. After presenting it to Eurystheus, the bull was later released and continued to roam, eventually becoming the Marathonian bull, which Theseus would later deal with. The eighth labor was particularly gruesome. Heracles had to acquire the mares of Diomedes. Diomedes, a Thracian king and son of Ares, owned 4 monstrous horses that were fed on human flesh. These untamed beasts were wild, ferocious, and incredibly strong. Heracles, accompanied by some companions, defeated Diomedes and fed him to his own mares, a grim but effective way to calm them. Once their master was consumed, the mares became docile and were easily led back to Eurystheus. In some versions, after consuming Diomedes, the mares became tame and were then freed. This labor highlighted the brutal side of Heracles's methods when confronted with truly savage threats. For his ninth labor, Heracles journeyed to the land of the Amazons, a fierce tribe of warrior women, to obtain the girdle of Hippolyta, their queen. The girdle was a symbol of Hippolyta's authority and strength, given to her by Ares. Initially, Hippolyta, impressed by Heracles's reputation and charisma, was willing to give him the girdle peacefully. However, Hera, ever watchful and malicious, disguised herself and spread a rumor among the Amazons that Heracles intended to abduct their queen. This incited the Amazons to attack, forcing Heracles to fight. In the ensuing battle, Heracles tragically killed Hippolyta, believing she had betrayed him, and then took the girdle by force, demonstrating how Hera's interference could turn a peaceful mission into a violent tragedy. The 10th labor sent Heracles on an even more distant and perilous journey to retrieve the cattle of Geryon. Geryon was a fearsome, three-bodied, winged giant who lived on the island of Erythea, far in the western ocean, guarded by a monstrous, two-headed dog, Orthrus, and a herdsman, Evrytion. These magical apples, which granted immortality, belonged to Hera and grew in a sacred garden guarded by the Hesperides and a terrifying 100-headed dragon named Ladon. Heracles faced numerous challenges on his journey to the garden, including wrestling the sea god Nereus for information and encountering the giant Antaeus. When he finally reached the garden, he didn't directly fight the dragon. Instead, he sought the help of Atlas, the Titan condemned to hold up the sky. Heracles offered to temporarily hold the heavens in Atlas's place if Atlas would retrieve the apples for him, as only Atlas could enter the garden freely. Atlas agreed, but upon his return, he tried to trick Heracles into taking over his burden permanently. Heracles, with a clever ruse, agreed, asking Atlas to briefly hold the sky again so he could adjust his cloak. Once Atlas took the sky back, Heracles quickly retrieved the apples and departed, proving his intelligence could overcome even the most cunning of Titans. To reach this distant land, Heracles borrowed the golden cup of Helios, the sun god, which the sun used to travel across the sky. He faced down Orthrus and Evrytion, slaying them both, and then confronted Geryon himself. In a fierce battle, Heracles used his poisoned arrows to defeat the three-bodied giant. He then herded the cattle, a vast and magnificent herd, on a long and arduous journey back to Greece, facing numerous challenges and overcoming various obstacles along the way, including the monster Cacus in Italy, showcasing his endurance and determination across vast, uncharted territories. The 11th labor brought Heracles to the very edge of the world, a task that required cunning and divine assistance to fetch the golden apples of the Hesperides. The 12th and final labor was the most daunting of all, an act that few mortals would ever attempt to bring Cerberus, the formidable three-headed dog, guardian of the underworld, back to the surface. This task required Heracles to descend into the chilling realm of the dead itself. To prepare for this perilous journey, Heracles was initiated into the Eleusinian mysteries, rites that granted him safe passage and understanding of the underworld's secrets. His story begins with his grandfather, King Acrisius of Argos, who received a grim prophecy. He would be killed by his own grandson. Terrified, Acrisius imprisoned his beautiful daughter, Dano, in a bronze tower or underground chamber to prevent her from ever having a child. However, Zeus, captivated by Danae's beauty, managed to enter her confinement, not in physical form, but as a shower of golden rain, impregnating her. Thus, Perseus was born, a demigod with divine lineage. Acrisius, unwilling to directly defy the gods by killing his grandson, placed Dano and the infant Perseus into a wooden chest and cast it into the sea, hoping they would perish in the waves, thereby avoiding the prophecy without direct patricide. Once in Hades' realm, Heracles encountered many tormented souls and mythological figures. He sought permission from Hades himself to take Cerberus. Hades, impressed by Heracles' courage, agreed on one condition. Heracles had to subdue Cerberus using only his bare hands, without any weapons. In a monumental struggle, Heracles, relying on his superhuman strength and endurance, wrestled the monstrous hound, eventually subduing it with a chokehold. He then dragged the terrified, growling beast to Eurystheus, who, upon seeing the terrifying guardian of the dead, was so horrified that he quickly ordered Heracles to return Cerberus to the underworld, marking the completion of all 12 labors. After completing his arduous labors, Heracles continued his heroic deeds, participating in the Argonautic expedition, fighting in wars, and having more adventures. His death was ultimately caused by the poisoned blood of the centaur Nessus, a trick orchestrated by the jealous centaur and a misunderstanding by his last wife, Deianira. As his mortal body burned on a pyre, his divine essence ascended to Mount Olympus. There, Heracles was finally welcomed among the gods, achieving apotheosis and even reconciling with Hera, who, in a rare moment, adopted him as her son. He married Hebe, the goddess of youth, and lived eternally among the Olympians, a testament to his extraordinary strength, his perseverance through immense suffering, and his ultimate triumph over both mortal and divine obstacles. Heracles became the symbol of physical strength, endurance, and the struggle of humanity against overwhelming odds, a hero whose legend inspired countless generations. Another hero whose fate was intertwined with prophecy and monstrous encounters was Perseus. The chest drifted across the waves until it washed ashore on the island of Seriphos, where it was discovered by Dictys, a kind fisherman. Dictys, a benevolent soul, rescued Dano and Perseus and raised Perseus as his own son. Unlike her two immortal sisters, Steno and Euryale, Medusa was mortal, but her gaze turned anyone who looked upon her directly into stone. This made her incredibly dangerous and seemingly impossible to defeat. Perseus, however, was favored by the gods, who recognized his courage and righteous cause. He received crucial divine aid. Athena, the goddess of wisdom and strategic warfare, provided him with a highly polished bronze shield, so reflective it could be used as a mirror, allowing him to see Medusa's reflection without looking at her directly. Hermes, the messenger god, gave him his winged sandals for swift flight, and a special curved sword, sharp enough to sever Medusa's tough neck. Some versions also mention Hades lending him his cap of darkness, allowing him to approach Medusa unseen. Life was peaceful for a time. However, Dictys's brother, Polydex, the ruthless king of Seriphos, desired Dano. When Perseus grew into a strong young man, he protected his mother from Polydex's unwanted advances. To get rid of Perseus, Polydex cunningly tricked him. He announced his intention to marry another woman and demanded a gift of horses from all his subjects. Perseus, lacking horses, impulsively boasted that he could bring anything, even the head of the fearsome Medusa, as a gift. Polydics immediately seized upon this boast, seeing it as an opportunity to send Perseus on a suicidal quest, clearing the way for him to claim Dano. Medusa was one of the three Gorgons, monstrous sisters with snakes for hair, terrifying tusks, and brazen claws. To find Medusa's lair, Perseus first had to visit the three ancient sisters who shared one eye and one tooth among them. These ancient crones held the knowledge of Medusa's whereabouts. Perseus ambushed them, snatching their shared eye as they passed it between them. He refused to return it until they revealed the path to the nymphs of the north, who possessed the magical items he needed for his quest. The Greeks, desperate to regain their sight, reluctantly told him what he needed to know. Armed with the divine gifts and crucial information, Perseus flew to the distant land where the Gorgons resided, a place strewn with the petrified figures of Medusa's unfortunate victims. Approaching Medusa's lair, Perseus used the highly polished shield as a mirror, carefully watching her reflection to avoid her deadly gaze. As Medusa lay sleeping, Perseus hovered above her, guided by Athena's steady hand. With one swift, decisive stroke of Hermes' curved sword, he severed her snake-haired head. Enraged by the king's treachery, Perseus burst into Polydex' palace, where the king and his courtiers were gathered. Polydex scoffed at Perseus, demanding proof of Medusa's head. With a grim satisfaction, Perseus declared he had indeed brought the head and dramatically pulled it from his magical pouch. He averted his own gaze, and as Polydex and his terrified courtiers looked directly at the horrific visage, they were instantly turned into statues of stone, forever frozen in their positions of disbelief and fear. Perseus then made Dictys, the kind fisherman who had saved him and his mother, the new, just king of Syria. From the gushing neck of Medusa, two remarkable beings sprang forth: Pegasus, the magnificent winged horse, and Chrysaor, a giant bearing a golden sword. Perseus quickly placed Medusa's still potent head into a magical pouch given to him by the nymphs, its petrifying power still active, as her immortal sisters, Steno and Euryale, awoke and pursued him. He donned Hades' helm of invisibility, vanishing from their sight and making a swift escape on his winged sandals. On his flight back home, Perseus passed over the kingdom of Ethiopia, where he witnessed a distressing sight: a beautiful maiden, Andromeda, chained naked to a rock by the sea. She was a sacrifice to a terrifying sea monster, Cetus, sent by Poseidon to punish her mother, Queen Cassiopeia, for boasting that she was more beautiful than the Nereids. Perseus, immediately captivated by Andromeda's beauty and pitying her plight, swooped down. He learned of her predicament and bravely offered to save her in exchange for her hand in marriage. When Cetus emerged from the depths, a monstrous creature of the sea, Perseus engaged it in a fierce battle, using his divine sword, or, in some accounts, turning it to stone with Medusa's head. After slaying the beast, he freed Andromeda, and they were later married, despite the objections of her uncle Phineus, to whom she was originally betrothed. Perseus famously used Medusa's head to turn Phineus and his followers to stone during the wedding feast. Upon his triumphant return to Seriphos, Perseus found that Polydics had been relentlessly harassing Dano, believing Perseus to be dead. With his mother safe and his vengeance complete, Perseus eventually returned to his homeland of Argos, seeking to reconcile with his grandfather, Acrisius. However, the prophecy that had haunted Acrisius from the beginning was destined to be fulfilled, not through malice, but through tragic accident. His parentage was complex and steeped in mystery. His mother was Aethra, the princess of Troezen. His father was officially Aegeus, the king of Athens, but in a separate union, Aethra had also slept with Poseidon, the god of the sea, implying a divine lineage for Theseus. Before returning to Athens, Aegeus left a sword and a pair of sandals hidden beneath a massive rock, instructing Aethra that when their son was strong enough to retrieve them, he should journey to Athens to claim his birthright. As a young man, Theseus, demonstrating his immense strength, effortlessly rolled away the heavy stone and retrieved the items, setting him on his destined path to Athens. During an athletic contest or discus-throwing competition in Larissa, Perseus accidentally threw a discus that veered off course, striking Acrisius in the head and killing him instantly. Thus, the prophecy was irrevocably fulfilled, despite all attempts to prevent it, demonstrating the inescapable power of fate in Greek mythology. After these events, Perseus founded the city of Mycenae, establishing a powerful dynasty. His heroic deeds and his connection to the gods made him a revered figure, a symbol of divine favor and the ultimate triumph of courage over seemingly insurmountable odds. Another legendary Athenian hero, renowned for his courage and cunning, was Theseus, the beloved founder hero of Athens. Instead of taking the safe sea route to Athens, Theseus, eager to prove his heroic mettle and clear the dangerous roads, chose the perilous overland journey. Along the way, he encountered and defeated a series of notorious bandits and monstrous figures, performing his own set of 6 labors, mirroring Heracles' feats, and establishing his reputation as a formidable hero. Theseus wrestled the brute, killed him, and took his club, making it his own iconic weapon. Theseus, using Sinis's own cruel method, bound the bandit between 2 bent pine trees and allowed them to spring back, ripping him asunder. First, he encountered Periphates, known as the Club-Bearer, a giant who ambushed travelers and bludgeoned them to death with his iron club. Theseus hunted down and slew the beast, freeing the region from its terror. Next, he faced Sinis, the Pine-Bender, a giant bandit who forced travelers to help him bend pine trees, then released the trees, tearing his victims apart. He then encountered the monstrous Crommyonian Sow, a giant, ferocious pig that ravaged the countryside. Further along, he came across Siren, a notorious brigand who forced travelers to wash his feet on a cliff edge, then kicked them into the sea, where they were devoured by a giant turtle. Theseus, in turn, kicked Siren off the cliff, serving him his own cruel fate. He then wrestled Cercyon, a powerful king near Eleusis, who challenged passersby to a wrestling match, always killing them. Medea, a powerful sorceress and Aegeus's current wife, immediately recognized Theseus as a threat to her own son's claim to the throne. She attempted to poison Theseus, but at the last moment, Aegeus recognized the sword Theseus carried, realizing it was the one he had left under the rock. Medea's plot was foiled, and she fled Athens, while Theseus was joyfully acknowledged as the king's son and heir. Theseus defeated and killed Cercyon in a wrestling bout, making the road safe. Finally, he confronted Procrustes, the Stretcher, a sinister host who offered travelers a bed. If they were too tall for the bed, he would chop off their limbs. If too short, he would stretch them to fit. Theseus, using Procrustes' own method against him, forced the bandit onto his own bed and summarily killed him, bringing an end to his gruesome hospitality. Upon his arrival in Athens, Theseus was not immediately recognized by his father, King Aegeus, who had long been influenced by the enchantress Medea. Theseus's most famous and pivotal adventure, however, involved the terrifying Minotaur. Each year, Athens was forced to send a tribute of 7 young men and 7 young women to King Minos of Crete. Ariadne fell deeply in love with him and, defying her father, offered to help him, provided he would take her back to Athens as his wife. She gave Theseus a magical thread and a sword. He continued to participate in many heroic expeditions, though some were less successful. He was a close companion of Heracles and was involved in the Chaldean boar hunt. He fought alongside the Amazons and even abducted their queen, Antiope, with whom he had a son, Hippolytus. In his later years, he became involved in a reckless and ultimately tragic venture with his friend Pirithous, king of the Lapiths. Pirithous, desiring a daughter of Zeus, decided to abduct Persephone, the queen of the underworld. Theseus, loyal to his friend, accompanied him on this foolhardy quest to Hades' realm. Hades, cunningly, invited them to sit on chairs of forgetfulness, which immediately bound them in place. Heracles later rescued Theseus during his 12th labor, but Pirithous remained trapped forever. Theseus's later life was filled with exile, loss, and internal conflict, eventually dying, possibly by treachery, on the island of Despite his flaws and later misfortunes, Theseus remained a foundational hero for Athens, symbolizing the city's strength, cunning, and civic virtues. A complex figure who brought both order and chaos. The thread unspooled as he entered the labyrinth would allow him to find his way back out of the confounding maze after he had slain the Minotaur. Following the winding passages, Theseus eventually confronted the terrifying Minotaur in the heart of the labyrinth, in a fierce, hand-to-hand combat, relying on his strength and courage. Theseus wrestled the monstrous beast and successfully slew it, freeing Athens from its terrible burden. He then followed Ariadne's thread back out of the labyrinth, leading the remaining Athenian youths to freedom. This gruesome tribute was punishment for the death of Minos' son, Androgeos, who was killed in Athens. Ariadne was either abandoned by Theseus on the island of Naxos or died there. As Theseus's ship approached Athens, he forgot a crucial instruction given by his father, Aegeus. They had agreed that if Theseus succeeded, he would change the ship's black sails to white sails. In his jubilation or grief over Ariadne, Theseus neglected to change the sails. King Aegeus, watching anxiously from the cliff tops, saw the black sails and, believing his son had perished in the labyrinth, was overcome with despair. He threw himself into the sea below, which has ever since been known as the Aegean Sea in his honor. Theseus, upon his arrival, became the rightful king of Athens, establishing many democratic reforms and uniting the various Attic communities into a single, powerful state. These 14 youths were sent into the labyrinth, an intricate and inescapable maze designed by Daedalus, where they would be devoured by the Minotaur. The Minotaur was a monstrous creature with the body of a man and the head of a bull, born from the unnatural union of Minos' wife Pasiphae and a sacred bull sent by Poseidon. Theseus, horrified by this injustice, volunteered to be one of the tributes, determined to slay the beast and end Athens' suffering. Upon arriving in Crete, Theseus immediately captivated Ariadne, King Minos' daughter. On the return journey from Crete, a tragic mistake overshadowed Theseus's triumph. Theseus's adventures did not end with the Minotaur. Another epic tale of heroism against monstrous odds involves Jason and the Argonauts, a collective of heroes on a grand quest for the Golden Fleece. The story begins in Iolcus, where Peleus, Jason's treacherous uncle, usurped the throne from Jason's father, King Aeson. A prophecy warned Peleus to beware of a man wearing only one sandal. When Jason, having lost a sandal while helping an old woman cross a river, appeared before Peleus, the king recognized the prophecy. Aeson, unwilling to part with the fleece, set seemingly impossible tasks for Jason, intending to lead him to his doom. Jason had to yoke 2 fire-breathing bulls with bronze hooves, plow a large field, and then sow it with dragon's teeth. From these teeth, a formidable army of armed warriors would immediately spring forth from the earth, and Jason would have to defeat them. Medea, King Aet's daughter, a powerful sorceress and priestess of Hecate, fell madly in love with Jason. Thanks to the intervention of Hera and Aphrodite, to get rid of Jason, Peleus promised to yield the throne if Jason retrieved the legendary Golden Fleece from the distant and perilous land of Colchis. This fleece, from a winged ram, was a symbol of kingship and divinity, guarded by a sleepless dragon and powerful magical forces. The quest was deemed impossible, a certain death sentence. Jason, undeterred, accepted the challenge and issued a call for heroes across Greece to join him. From all corners of the land, the greatest heroes of the age gathered, forming the illustrious crew of the ship Argo, thus becoming the Argonauts. The crew included famous figures such as Heracles, Orpheus, the Dioscuri, Castor, and Pollux, Atalanta, and many others, representing a formidable assembly of strength, skill, and courage. The ship Argo itself was no ordinary vessel. It was built with the help of Athena and contained a magical piece of timber from the talking oak of Dodona, endowing it with the power of speech and prophecy. Their journey was long and fraught with peril, an odyssey across unknown seas and through mythical lands, encountering strange peoples and terrifying creatures. Their journey to Colchis was marked by a series of legendary encounters. One of their first stops was the island of Lemnos, inhabited solely by women who had murdered all their men. The Argonauts stayed there for a time, helping to repopulate the island. They then faced the blind prophet Phineus, who was tormented by the monstrous harpies, foul bird women who snatched and defiled his food whenever he tried to eat. The Argonauts, specifically the winged Berets, drove off the harpies, freeing Phineus, who, in gratitude, revealed the path ahead and warned them of the dreaded Symplegades, the clashing rocks. These were 2 enormous rocks that guarded the entrance to the Black Sea, constantly smashing together, crushing any ship that dared to pass between them. Following Phineus's advice, Jason sent a dove through first. As the rocks clashed together and began to separate, the Argo swiftly rode through, escaping by the narrowest of margins, though losing a piece of its stern. Once a ship had passed, the Symplegades were destined to remain fixed forever, no longer a threat. Upon reaching Colchis, the kingdom ruled by the powerful and cunning king Aeson, son of Helios and brother of Circe and Pasiphae. Jason presented his demand for the Golden Fleece. Medea's desperate love for Jason led her to betray her father and use her formidable magic to help the hero. She provided Jason with a magical ointment to protect him from the bull's fire and strength, allowing him to yoke them. They faced various dangers, including the sirens, alluring half-bird, half-woman creatures whose enchanting songs lured sailors to their death on rocky shores. Orpheus, with his divine music, played his lyre so beautifully that he drowned out the sirens' voices, saving the Argonauts from their fatal enchantment. They also navigated the perilous straits of Scylla and Charybdis, monstrous sea creatures that devoured ships and sailors. Medea's magic often proved indispensable in overcoming these and other challenges, though her increasingly dark methods began to trouble some of the Argonauts. Their long journey eventually brought them back to Iolcus. She then advised him to throw a rock into the midst of the earthborn warriors, causing them to fight and kill each other, thus neutralizing the threat. Medea, fueled by her vengeful magic, again assisted Jason. She tricked Peleus's daughters into believing she could restore their father's youth by cutting him into pieces and boiling him in a cauldron with magical herbs. The daughters, eager to restore their father, complied, but Medea, of course, did not use the rejuvenating herbs, and Peleus was gruesomely killed. This act of violence, along with other dark deeds, ultimately alienated Jason, who later betrayed Medea for another princess, leading to Medea's infamous and horrific revenge, killing their own children. Jason's later life was tragic, eventually dying an ignominious death when a rotten timber from the Argo fell on his head. The tale of Jason and the Argonauts is an epic journey of adventure, loyalty, betrayal, and the complex consequences of ambition and divine intervention, highlighting the costs of heroism and the dangerous allure of powerful magic. Finally, to acquire the Golden Fleece, Jason had to face the sleepless dragon that guarded it. Medea, with her potent sorcery, cast a powerful sleeping spell on the monstrous serpent, allowing Jason to retrieve the fleece unhindered. After acquiring the fleece, Jason and the Argonauts fled Colchis, taking Medea with them. Ates, enraged by his daughter's betrayal and the theft of the fleece, pursued them fiercely. Apsidas dismembered his body and scattered his parts into the sea, forcing her father to stop and collect them for proper burial, buying the Argonauts precious time for their escape. The return journey of the Argonauts was as fraught with peril as their outward voyage. Beyond these epic heroes and their grand quests, the Greek world was populated by a myriad of other terrifying monsters, each a unique challenge embodying primal fears or embodying the chaotic forces that heroes sought to overcome. The Chimera was a horrifying beast with the head of a lion, the body of a goat, and a serpent's tail, capable of breathing fire. It terrorized the region of Lycia until it was slain by the hero Bellerophon. Bellerophon, riding the winged horse Pegasus, used his aerial advantage to avoid the Chimera as fiery breath and ultimately defeated it by thrusting a lead-tipped spear down its throat. The lead melted from the beast's fire, suffocating it from the inside, demonstrating ingenuity, triumphing over brute monstrosity. The Sphinx, a monstrous creature with the head of a woman, the body of a lion, and the wings of a bird, famously guarded the city of Thebes. It posed a riddle to all who sought to pass. What walks on 4 feet in the morning, 2 feet at noon, and 3 feet in the evening? Scylla was a terrifying, multi-headed monster, often depicted with 6 heads on long necks, and dog-like bodies emerging from her waist, who lived in a cave on one side of a narrow channel, snatching sailors from passing ships. On the opposite side was Charybdis, a monstrous whirlpool that swallowed vast amounts of water 3 times a day, creating a deadly vortex that sucked ships into its depths. Sailors were forced to choose between the immediate, horrifying death offered by Scylla or the almost certain destruction of Charybdis. These monsters were famously encountered by Odysseus during his long journey home from the Trojan War, highlighting the impossible choices and the constant peril faced by ancient mariners. Failure to answer resulted in being devoured by the Sphinx. Many perished until the hero Oedipus arrived. He correctly answered the riddle. Man, who crawls as a baby, walks upright in adulthood, and uses a cane in old age. Defeated, the Sphinx cast herself from her perch and died, breaking her reign of terror over Thebes. The perilous straits that travelers often feared navigating were guarded by Scylla and Charybdis. The sirens, seductive, half-bird, half-woman creatures, inhabited rocky islands and lured sailors to their doom with their enchanting and irresistible songs. Their beautiful voices promised knowledge and pleasure, but their shores were littered with the bones of their victims. Odysseus, warned by Circe, famously devised a plan to pass them safely. He had his crew plug their ears with beeswax, and then tied himself to the mast of his ship, instructing his men not to untie him no matter how much he begged, allowing him to hear their song without succumbing to their fatal allure. This cunning strategy allowed him to survive an encounter that had claimed countless lives, demonstrating that intelligence and foresight could overcome even the most enchanting and deadly of temptations. These stories of heroes confronting and overcoming terrifying monsters were more than just adventure tales. They served profound cultural purposes in ancient Greece. They defined what it meant to be a hero, not just someone with great strength, but also someone with courage, cunning, divine favor, and often a moral purpose, even if flawed. The monsters represented the chaotic, destructive forces of the world. Natural disasters, untamed wilderness, primal fears, and the consequences of divine wrath or human transgression. By conquering these beasts, heroes brought order out of chaos, made the world safer for humanity, and established cultural norms. They often symbolized the triumph of civilization over barbarism, reason over instinct, and the human spirit's ability to endure and overcome overwhelming obstacles. These myths were passed down through generations, shaping the Greek identity and their understanding of their place in a world overseen by powerful gods and filled with both glory and danger. The Trojan War, a clash of heroes and gods among the most enduring and monumental sagas in all of Greek mythology, is the epic tale of the Trojan War, a colossal conflict that raged for 10 long years, pitting the might of the unified Achaean forces against the formidable city of Troy. It was a war born not just from a single act of betrayal, but from a complex web of divine machinations, human desires, unbridled beauty, and an inescapable prophecy. Even Zeus, the king of the gods, wisely refused to judge. Knowing the immense jealousy and destructive power of his wife and daughters, he awarded the golden apple to Aphrodite. This decision, seemingly a simple act of preference, set in motion a chain of events that would plunge the entire Greek world into a devastating war. Aphrodite immediately set about fulfilling her promise. The most beautiful woman in the world was Helen of Sparta, a woman of unparalleled beauty, whose face was said to launch 1,000 ships. Helen was already married to Menelaus, the powerful and respected king of Sparta, and she was known for her loyalty and virtue. However, Aphrodite used her divine powers to inspire an irresistible passion in Helen for Paris. When Paris visited Sparta as a guest, Helen, overwhelmed by Aphrodite's influence, either willingly eloped with him to Troy, abandoning her husband and young daughter, or was abducted by force, swept away by the charm and divine manipulation of the Trojan prince. This act, whether elopement or abduction, was a grave violation of hospitality and a profound insult to Menelaus and all of Greece. Instead, he decreed that a mortal would arbitrate this divine beauty contest. The chosen judge was Paris, a young and handsome prince of Troy, son of King Priam and Queen Hecuba. Paris was known for his discerning eye and his life as a shepherd, having been exposed at birth due to a prophecy that he would cause the ruin of Troy, only to be found and raised by shepherds. Each goddess, desperate to win the golden apple and secure the title of the fairest, appeared before Paris and offered him an irresistible bribe. Hera promised him immense power and a vast empire, making him the ruler of all Asia. Athena offered him unparalleled wisdom and glory in battle, ensuring he would be a triumphant warrior, never knowing defeat. But Aphrodite, the goddess of love, offered him the most alluring bribe of all, the love of the most beautiful woman in the entire world. This conflict was a titanic clash, not only between mortal armies, but also a grand stage where the Olympian gods themselves chose sides, directly intervening in battles, influencing the fates of heroes and revealing their own complex passions and rivalries. The Trojan War was more than just a historical event. It became a foundational myth for the Greeks, a story that defined their understanding of heroism, destiny, the price of glory, and the tragic consequences of human arrogance and divine interference. It was a struggle of such immense scale that it captivated generations, shaping their literature, art, and even their moral philosophy. The seeds of this catastrophic war were sown long before any armies gathered at a seemingly joyous occasion. The wedding of Peleus, a mortal king, and the beautiful sea nymph Thetis. This was a grand affair, attended by all the Olympian gods, a rare moment of divine and mortal celebration. However, one goddess was deliberately excluded from the guest list: Eris, the malevolent and mischievous goddess of discord. Outraged by this snub, Eris, in a fit of spite, arrived uninvited and, during the festivities, cast a single golden apple into the midst of the feasting deities. On the apple, a simple but potent inscription was etched: "To the fairest." Immediately, chaos erupted. Three powerful goddesses, all believing themselves to be the rightful recipient of such a prestigious title, laid claim to the apple. Hera, the majestic queen of the gods; Athena, the formidable goddess of wisdom and strategic warfare; and Aphrodite, the captivating goddess of love and beauty. The goddesses' quarrel became so intense and disruptive that none of the other Olympians dared to declare a winner, knowing that choosing one would incur the wrath of the other two. Paris, swayed by the intoxicating promise of love and beauty, made his fateful choice. The abduction, or willing departure, of Helen ignited a furious outrage across all of Greece. Menelaus, humiliated and enraged by the betrayal, immediately appealed to his older brother, Agamemnon, the powerful king of Mycenae, and the recognized high king and supreme commander of all the Achaean forces. From the rugged shores of Ithaca came Odysseus, the cunning and resourceful king, renowned for his sharp intellect and persuasive speech. He was the son of Peleus and the sea nymph Thetis. From Salamis came Ajax the Greater, a towering warrior of immense physical strength, second only to Achilles in battle, known for his formidable shield made of 7 layers of oxhide. From Argos came Diomedes, a valiant and skilled warrior, favored by Athena, known for his bravery even against divine opponents. The wise and venerable Nestor, the aged king of Pylos, though too old for battle, contributed invaluable counsel and strategic advice, his wisdom honed by years of experience. His long speeches often recalled the glorious deeds of heroes past, inspiring the younger generation. Accompanying Achilles was his closest companion and beloved friend Patroclus, a skilled warrior in his own right, whose bond with Achilles was legendary. The sheer scale of this combined force, 1,000 ships carrying tens of thousands of warriors, was unprecedented, ready to sail across the Aegean Sea and besiege the distant city of Troy, his mother. Knowing a prophecy foretold that Achilles would either live a long, unmemorable life or a short, glorious one, attempted to make him immortal by dipping him in the river Styx, holding him by his heel, which remained his only vulnerable spot. Thetis, desperate to prevent him from dying in the war, had hidden him on the island of Cyrus, disguised as a girl among the daughters of King Lycomedes. But the Greeks, desperate for his incomparable strength, dispatched Odysseus to find him. Odysseus, with his trademark cunning, placed weapons and women's adornments before the disguised Achilles. When an alarm sounded, Achilles instinctively grabbed the weapons, revealing his true warrior nature and his inescapable destiny. Knowing the grim prophecy of a long and perilous war, Odysseus initially feigned madness to avoid joining the expedition, plowing his fields with an ox and a donkey and sowing salt instead of seeds. However, the astute Palamedes, suspicious of the act, placed Odysseus's infant son Telemachus in the path of the plow. Odysseus instinctively swerved to avoid harming his son, revealing his sanity and his true identity, thus committing him to the war. Agamemnon, ambitious and eager to extend his influence, saw this as an opportunity to unite the disparate Greek city-states under his command and assert Greek dominance. However, there was a solemn oath that bound many of the Greek heroes to Menelaus's cause. Years before, when Helen was still unmarried, her foster father, King Tyndareus, had insisted that all her suitors swear a sacred oath to defend Helen's chosen husband against any wrong done to him concerning their marriage. This oath of Tyndareus now compelled the greatest heroes and kings from all over Greece to rally to Menelaus's side, uniting a formidable, though often fractious, army. The gathering of the Achaean forces was an unprecedented mobilization of power and heroism, a muster of legendary figures from every corner of the Greek world. From the fiercely independent kingdom of Phta came Achilles, the mightiest warrior of all, a demigod whose prowess in battle was unmatched. Other legendary figures joined the cause. However, the vast fleet gathered at Aulis faced an insurmountable obstacle. The winds refused to blow. Impenetrable walls, said to have been built with the aid of Apollo and Poseidon. Foremost among them was Hector, the noblest and most valiant prince of Troy, son of King Priam, and the undisputed greatest warrior among the Trojans. Hector was not only a formidable fighter, but also a devoted husband to Andromache and a loving father to his infant son. As he fought not for glory or conquest, but for the protection of his family, his city, and his people, embodying the ideals of duty and sacrifice. His emotional farewell to Andromache and Astyanax, knowing he might not return, is one of the most poignant moments in the Iliad, highlighting the human cost of war. Other key Trojan figures included Paris, whose fateful choice had ignited the war; Aeneas, a strong warrior and son of Aphrodite, destined to survive the war and found the Roman lineage; and Cassandra, a prophetess, daughter of Priam, who was cursed by Apollo, never to be believed even when she spoke the truth, thus dooming Troy to ignore her warnings. The Trojans, led by their wise and aged King Priam, and defended by their valiant princes and allies, were prepared for a long and bitter struggle. The first 9 years of the war were largely characterized by skirmishes, raids on neighboring towns for supplies and plunder, and inconclusive battles outside the city walls. The Achaeans were unable to breach Troy's formidable defenses, and the Trojans were unable to drive the Greeks back into the sea. It was a brutal stalemate, a war of attrition that tested the endurance of both sides. Agamemnon, in a moment of arrogance, had either boasted of his hunting prowess, claiming to be superior to Artemis, or had killed a sacred stag in her grove. To appease the offended goddess and secure favorable winds for the journey, Calchas declared that Agamemnon must make a terrible sacrifice, his own eldest daughter, Iphigenia. Agamemnon, torn between his paternal love and his duty to the Greek cause, was persuaded by Odysseus and the other leaders to agree. He lured Iphigenia to Aulis under the pretense of marrying her to Achilles. At the altar, as the knife was poised to strike, Artemis, moved by compassion or by a divine intervention, regardless, the winds immediately rose, allowing the massive fleet to finally set sail for Troy. The Trojan defenders were equally legendary, boasting their own roster of heroic figures. The Trojan War was not merely a conflict between mortals. It was a grand chessboard upon which the Olympian gods themselves played out their rivalries and preferences. The divine involvement was constant and direct, with gods often descending to the battlefield, disguised or in their true forms, to aid their favored heroes or hinder their enemies. It began with Agamemnon's greed. During a raid, Agamemnon took Chryses, the daughter of a priest of Apollo, as his war prize. He publicly denounced Agamemnon and declared that he would no longer fight for the Achaeans. He withdrew himself and his mighty Myrmidon warriors from the battlefield, retreating to his ships and refusing to participate in any further combat. His mother, the goddess Thetis, appeared to him in his sorrow and wrath. Achilles, heartbroken and humiliated, begged his divine mother to intervene with Zeus. He pleaded with her to ask Zeus to ensure that the Trojans would gain the upper hand in battle, causing the Achaeans to suffer terrible losses, so that Agamemnon would realize his folly and the indispensable value of Achilles' presence. Thetis ascended to Olympus and successfully pleaded with Zeus, who, despite his attempts at neutrality, promised to honor her son's request. Her father pleaded for her return, offering a ransom, but Agamemnon arrogantly refused. The priest then prayed to Apollo, who, enraged by the disrespect shown to his priest, unleashed a terrible plague upon the Achaean army, causing widespread death among men and animals for 9 days. Calchas, the prophet, revealed the cause of the plague: Apollo's wrath. Agamemnon was forced to return Chryses, but, in a fit of pride and anger, he retaliated by seizing Brises, the beautiful war prize of Achilles, insulting the greatest warrior in the Achaean army in front of his peers. On the side of the Achaeans were Hera, driven by her eternal hatred for Paris, who chose Aphrodite, and for Troy, which was Paris's city. Athena and Poseidon, who, despite helping build Troy's walls, held a grudge against King Laomedon of Troy for not paying him for his labor. On the side of the Trojans were Apollo, Aphrodite, and Ares, the god of war, who often fought for whichever side was losing to prolong the bloodshed, but often favored the Trojans due to his affair with Aphrodite. Zeus, the supreme king, attempted to maintain a precarious neutrality, sometimes allowing the tide of battle to favor one side. The pivotal turning point in the 9th year of the war, and the central focus of Homer's epic poem, the Iliad, was the infamous quarrel of Achilles and Agamemnon. Achilles, his honor deeply wounded and his pride irrevocably damaged by Agamemnon's arrogant act, flew into a furious rage. Without Achilles, the tide of the war dramatically shifted. The Achaean forces began to suffer terrible defeats, pushed back relentlessly by the revitalized Trojan army, led by the formidable Hector. The Trojans, with renewed confidence and often aided by the direct intervention of gods like Apollo and Ares, drove the Greeks from the open plains, forcing them back towards their ships. Patroclus, fighting with the fierce spirit of his friend, decimated the Trojan ranks, driving them back from the ships and pushing them all the way to the city walls, forgetting Achilles' strict command in the heat of battle. His success was immense, but his hubris proved fatal. Near the Scion gates of Troy, he was struck by Apollo, who invisibly intervened, knocking off his helmet and weakening him. He was then wounded by Euphorbus, a Trojan warrior, and finally, tragically, slain by Hector, the greatest Trojan hero. Hector, seeing the opportunity, stripped the famous armor from Patroclus's body, unaware that it was not Achilles himself. The death of Patroclus was a profound blow to the Achaean morale, but it had an even greater impact on Achilles. The Achaean camp became a scene of despair and chaos, their ranks decimated, their leaders wounded, and their spirits broken. Agamemnon, facing utter defeat, eventually sent an embassy to Achilles, offering immense treasures, and the return of Briseis, untouched, along with countless other gifts, begging him to return to battle. But Achilles, consumed by his wounded pride and unwavering in his anger, stubbornly refused all pleas and offers, preferring to watch his countrymen suffer rather than compromise his honor. His refusal plunged the Greeks into deeper desperation, bringing them to the brink of total annihilation. As the Trojan assault intensified, reaching the very ships of the Achaeans, the situation became dire. Patroclus, Achilles' closest companion and most beloved friend, could no longer bear to witness the suffering and slaughter of his countrymen. His heart was heavy with sorrow and pity for the dying Greeks. He tearfully pleaded with Achilles to return to battle, or at least to allow him to fight in Achilles' place. Moved by Patroclus's genuine concern, but still unwilling to fight himself, Achilles reluctantly agreed to let Patroclus enter the fray, but with a crucial condition. Patroclus must wear Achilles' magnificent armor, striking fear into the Trojans and turning the tide. But he must only drive the Trojans away from the ships and absolutely not pursue them towards the city walls. Patroclus donned Achilles' gleaming armor, and his appearance on the battlefield immediately instilled terror in the Trojans, who believed Achilles himself had returned. When news reached Achilles of Patroclus' death, his profound grief transformed into an unimaginable, all-consuming rage. His sorrow was so intense that he literally tore at his hair and threw himself into the dirt. The Trojan forces scattered before him, terrified by his renewed, almost demonic ferocity. Rivers ran red with blood. His death came not on the battlefield in a grand confrontation, but through a cunning act of divine retribution and human weakness. Paris, the prince whose choice had started the war, aimed an arrow at Achilles. The arrow, however, was guided by Apollo, the god who had favored Troy and who held a grudge against Achilles for defiling Hector's body. The arrow struck Achilles in his single vulnerable spot, his heel, the very part of his body by which his mother, Thetis, had held him when she dipped him into the river Styx to make him immortal. The wound, though small, was instantly fatal, and the greatest Greek warrior fell, fulfilling the prophecy of his glorious but short life. His death plunged the Achaeans into deep mourning, and his magnificent armor became the subject of a bitter dispute between Odysseus and Ajax. Eventually, Achilles confronted Hector outside the walls of Troy, a momentous duel that would decide the fate of Troy's greatest champion. Despite his valiant courage and his knowledge of his own inevitable doom, Hector initially attempted to flee, circling the city walls 3 times with Achilles in relentless pursuit. Finally, Hector, realizing his fate was sealed, turned to face Achilles. In a brutal, heroic confrontation, Achilles, fueled by his grief for Patroclus, plunged his spear into Hector's throat, slaying him. But Achilles' rage was not sated. In a horrifying act of desecration, he tied Hector's body to his chariot by the ankles and dragged it around the walls of Troy for 12 days, a vengeful act that horrified even the gods. Only through the intervention of Zeus, who sent Iris to urge Priam, was Hector's body returned to his grieving father, King Priam, for a proper burial, a scene of profound sorrow and a brief moment of shared humanity between sworn enemies. The death of his beloved friend shattered his proud resolve and rekindled his desire for vengeance. His anger was terrifying, a force of nature. He swore immediate and brutal revenge upon Hector. However, he no longer had his armor, which Hector had taken. His divine mother Thetis, seeing his boundless grief and new determination, ascended to Mount Olympus and pleaded with Hephaestus, the divine smith god, to forge new, magnificent armor for her son. Hephaestus, in his celestial forge, created a masterpiece, a new shield adorned with intricate scenes of the cosmos, and human life, a helmet, breastplate, and greaves, all of unparalleled beauty and invulnerability. Clad in this divine armor, Achilles, a veritable force of destruction, returned to the battlefield, his eyes burning with a furious, unquenchable desire for vengeance, signaling a terrifying shift in the war's momentum. Achilles, burning with vengeful fury, tore through the Trojan ranks, seeking out Hector. Achilles continued his rampage, devastating the Trojan forces, but his own glorious, yet fated, life was drawing to a close. With Achilles gone, the Achaean morale wavered, but the war was far from over. The dispute over Achilles' divine armor led to another tragedy. Both Odysseus and Ajax, the greater, passionately argued for their right to possess the armor, a symbol of supreme martial prowess. The Greek leaders, after much debate, awarded the armor to the cunning Odysseus, recognizing his intellectual contributions to the war over Ajax's brute strength. Ajax, humiliated and enraged by what he perceived as a profound injustice, descended into a fit of madness, inflicted upon him by Athena. In his delusion, he slaughtered a flock of sheep, believing them to be the Achaean leaders who had wronged him. When he regained his sanity and realized the depth of his shameful act, Ajax, consumed by dishonor, fell upon his own sword, taking his own life. His death deprived the Achaeans of another formidable warrior. The war dragged on, with Troy's walls still standing impregnable. The Greeks, weary and frustrated, seemed no closer to victory. However, not everyone was convinced. Glaucon, a priest of Poseidon, was deeply suspicious. He warned his fellow Trojans, famously uttering the line, "Beware of Greeks bearing gifts." He even hurled a spear at the horse's side, which reverberated hollowly, further raising his suspicions. But as he tried to convince his people, two enormous sea serpents, sent by Poseidon or Athena, emerged from the sea. They coiled around Laocoon and his two sons, brutally crushing and devouring them. A horrific spectacle that the Trojans interpreted as a divine sign that Laocoon was wrong and that the horse was indeed a sacred offering. It was then that Odysseus, the cunning king of Ithaca, conceived a brilliant and audacious plan that would finally breach Troy's defenses and end the decade-long siege: the construction of the Trojan horse. This was a colossal wooden horse, seemingly a gift, but secretly a deadly trap. Under the guidance of Odysseus, and built by the skilled carpenter Hippias, the Greeks constructed the enormous hollow horse, large enough to contain a select group of their bravest warriors, including Odysseus himself, Menelaus, and many others. The rest of the Greek fleet then pretended to sail away, seemingly abandoning the siege, leaving the horse on the Trojan plain as an apparent offering. The Trojans, upon seeing the seemingly abandoned Greek camp and the enormous wooden horse, emerged from their city, jubilant at what they believed was the end of the war. Adding to the deception, the Greeks left behind a lone spy, Sinon, who allowed himself to be captured by the Trojans. Sinon, a master of deception, wove a fabricated tale. He claimed that the Greeks had built the horse as an offering to Athena to ensure a safe voyage home, and that they had deliberately made it too large to fit inside the city walls, hoping the Trojans would destroy it, thus incurring Athena's wrath. He convinced the Trojans that bringing the horse inside their city would bring them divine favor and make Troy impenetrable. Convinced by Sinon's compelling lies and the ominous fate of Laocoon, the Trojans, in a moment of fatal hubris, celebrated their supposed victory. They breached their own formidable walls, pulling the enormous Trojan horse into their city, believing it to be a glorious trophy and a sacred offering. They spent the night in revelry, celebrating the end of the long war, utterly unaware of the deadly secret hidden within their gates. Under the cover of darkness, as the city slept in drunken celebration, the elite Greek warriors, who had been hidden inside the hollow belly of the horse, emerged from their clandestine hiding place. They swiftly overpowered the unsuspecting guards, opened the city gates, and lit signal fires, calling back the rest of the Greek fleet, which had merely sailed to a nearby island and now silently returned under the cloak of night. The sack of Troy was brutal and merciless. The Greek soldiers poured into the city, driven by years of pent-up frustration and a thirst for vengeance. King Priam was brutally killed at the altar by Neoptolemus. Hector's infant son, Astyanax, was cruelly thrown from the city walls. The city was pillaged and then set ablaze, utterly destroyed. During the sack, many atrocities were committed by the Achaeans, further enraging some of the gods who had previously supported them. Most notable was the act of Ajax the Lesser, who dragged Cassandra, King Priam's prophetess daughter and a priestess of Athena, from Athena's temple and brutally violated her. This act of sacrilege within her own sanctuary ignited the fierce wrath of Athena, who, despite her previous support for the Greeks, vowed revenge against the Achaean forces for their impiety. Many other temples were desecrated, and the laws of hospitality and respect for the divine were openly defied, sealing the doom of many Greek heroes' journeys home. The aftermath of the Trojan War was not one of unblemished triumph for the Achaeans. Though Troy lay in ruins, many of the victorious Greek heroes faced long, perilous, and often tragic journeys home, known as the Nosti. Clytemnestra sought revenge for Agamemnon's sacrifice of their daughter Iphigenia at Aulis, a dark act that had haunted her for a decade. His bloody return was a tragic conclusion for the supreme commander of the Greek forces. Other heroes, like Menelaus, faced long and difficult voyages, constantly diverted by divine wrath, before finally returning home to a changed world. The gods, particularly Athena and Poseidon, enraged by the Greeks' sacrilege and arrogance during the sack of Troy, sent terrible storms, shipwrecks, and divine obstacles to plague their journeys. His epic journey, a story in itself, would be detailed in later myths, serving as a testament to human endurance, cunning, and the challenges of returning home from a great war. The Trojan War, while a victory for the Greeks, came at an immense cost, both in lives and in the moral degradation of many heroes. It reshaped the political landscape of the Bronze Age Aegean and became a profound narrative examining the nature of heroism, the inevitability of fate, the destructive power of human ambition and divine interference, and the tragic consequences of prolonged conflict. Its stories continued to be told and retold, providing moral lessons, inspiring epic poetry, and serving as a foundational element of Greek identity and literature for millennia. Many heroes perished at sea, never reaching their homelands, or faced further tragedies upon their return. Agamemnon, the high king and leader of the expedition, returned to Mycenae only to be brutally murdered by his vengeful wife, Clytemnestra, and her lover, Aegisthus. Most famously, Odysseus, the architect of the Trojan horse, faced a perilous 10-year journey home to Ithaca, filled with encounters with mythical creatures, divine enchantments, and devastating losses. The underworld and afterlife, realms of the departed for the ancient Greeks. Death was not merely the cessation of life, but a profound transition. A journey from the vibrant world of sunlight and mortal breath to a vast, shadowy, and inescapable dominion known as the underworld. Hades was a powerful, uncompromising deity, rarely seen on the surface world, and often feared by mortals who dared not speak his name aloud. There were several mythical entrances to the underworld, often described as dark caves, bottomless chasms, or stagnant lakes hidden in remote, desolate corners of the mortal world. One such famed entrance was at the very tip of Cape Tanarin in Laconia, another at Lake Avernus in Italy, shrouded by poisonous mists, or even at the mythical Cimmerian land, perpetually shrouded in fog. At the very threshold of Hades' realm stood its most famous guardian, Cerberus, the fearsome three-headed hound of Hades. This monstrous dog, with a mane of snakes and a dragon's tail, possessed immense strength. His perpetual vigilance ensured that no living soul could enter without permission, and, more crucially, that no dead soul could ever leave the underworld once they had crossed its threshold, enforcing the irreversible boundary between life and death. He was not a god of evil, but rather a just, albeit grim, sovereign of his realm, ensuring that the dead remained in their proper place and that the balance between life and death was maintained. His very presence emanated a chilling authority befitting the king of the departed. Persephone, the daughter of Demeter, brought a touch of spring's bittersweet beauty to the somber realm. Her forced abduction and subsequent marriage to Hades, forming the mythological basis for the changing seasons in the mortal world above. Her dual nature, queen of the dead for part of the year, and goddess of spring for the other, symbolized the cyclical nature of life, death, and rebirth inherent in the natural world. This subterranean realm, often simply referred to by the name of its ruler, Hades, was a stark contrast to the gleaming heights of Mount Olympus, the bustling cities of mortals, or the boundless expanse of the sea. It was a place of finality, a destination from which very few ever returned, a chilling and often melancholic landscape beneath the very roots of the earth, shrouded in perpetual twilight and silence. Unlike the Christian concept of hell, the Greek underworld was not primarily a place of universal punishment or eternal damnation for all souls. Instead, it was the universal destination for the departed, a complex, bureaucratic landscape where different souls experienced different fates, determined by their deeds in life, divine favor, or sheer arbitrary chance. It was a realm governed by strict, unyielding laws, reflecting the finality and inevitability of death itself. At the heart of this gloomy domain ruled Hades, the formidable and stern elder brother of Zeus and Poseidon, alongside his beautiful and reluctant queen, Persephone. Access to this subterranean kingdom was guarded by powerful entities and marked by distinctive features. The journey into the underworld involved crossing a series of mystical rivers, each with its own symbolic meaning and chilling properties. These rivers acted as both geographical boundaries and allegorical representations of the emotions and states associated with death and the afterlife. The most renowned and significant of these rivers was the Styx, the river of hatred or oath-taking. It was not merely a physical barrier, but a fundamental cosmological boundary, separating the land of the living from the land of the dead. Its waters were said to be so potent and sacred that even the Olympian gods themselves swore their most solemn and unbreakable oaths upon the Styx. It was a river of liquid fire, its burning currents contributing to the torment of the damned, and serving as a terrifying boundary for the most wicked souls. Any vow made upon its dark waters was absolutely binding, and to break such an oath would incur severe and dreadful consequences, including a year of speechlessness and 9 years of exile from the divine feasts. This profound power of the Styx cemented its status as one of the most ancient and revered elements of the cosmos, predating even the Olympian reign. The myth of Achilles' vulnerability stems from the Styx. His mother Thetis dipped him into its waters to make him invulnerable, holding him by his heel, which became his only weakness, highlighting the river's immense power to grant or deny immortality. Adjacent to the Styx, or flowing into it, was the Acheron, the river of woe or sorrow. This was often depicted as the primary river that newly deceased souls had to cross to reach the true depths of the underworld. Its name derived from the Greek word for lamentation, and its mournful sounds, often described as the cries of the unburied or the eternally grieving, echoed through the bleak valleys of the underworld, adding to its somber atmosphere. Its dark, sluggish waters reflected the grief and despair associated with death, and its banks were often described as desolate and barren, reflecting the finality of passing. The ferryman Charon typically plied his trade across the Acheron, transporting the shades of the dead to the other side. Further within the gloomy landscape flowed the Cocytus, the river of wailing. The Phlegethon was the river of fire, a searing torrent of flames that flowed through the innermost regions of the underworld, particularly near Tartarus, the place of eternal punishment. Finally, there was the Lethe, the river of forgetfulness. Its tranquil, murky waters had the power to erase all memories from the minds of the souls who drank from it. Most souls were encouraged to drink from the Lethe upon entering the underworld, so they would forget their earthly lives, their sorrows, and their joys, accepting their new, detached existence as shades. Charon was a dark, unkempt figure with piercing eyes, often depicted as a withered old man guiding his small, rickety skiff across the dark waters. The landscape was vast and variegated, reflecting the different categories of souls and their earthly deeds. His service, however, came at a price. It was a vital Greek burial custom to place a small coin, an obol, under the tongue of the deceased before burial. This coin was the fare for Charon. Only those souls who possessed the obol could pay Charon for passage across the river to the true gates of Hades' realm. Woe betide those who were not properly buried or whose families had neglected to provide the coin. Their wretched souls were condemned to wander the bleak shores of the Acheron, forever unable to cross, tormented by their inability to find rest in the afterlife. A powerful incentive for proper burial rites in ancient Greek society. This act of forgetting allowed the soul to move on, to sever its ties with the mortal world, and to fully embrace its new, often melancholic, reality in the realm of the dead. This river was particularly significant for those hoping for reincarnation, as a clear mind of past lives would hinder their future existence. The journey of the soul into the underworld was a solemn and carefully prescribed process, beginning immediately after a mortal's last breath. The first guide for the departed was Hermes Psychopomp, meaning soul guide. Hermes, the swift messenger of the gods, had the unique ability to traverse all realms, Olympus, the mortal world, and the underworld. It was his sacred duty to collect the souls of the deceased from their mortal bodies and lead them along the paths that wound through the darkness to the banks of the Acheron. He was the divine escort, ensuring that the ethereal shades reached their proper destination, preventing them from lingering as restless ghosts in the mortal world, a role that underscored his vital connection to the cycle of life and death. Upon reaching the banks of the Acheron, the souls encountered Charon, the ancient, gruff, and unwavering ferryman of the dead. After crossing the Acheron and passing the vigilant gaze of Cerberus at the entry gate, the souls arrived at the various regions of the underworld, where their ultimate fate was decided. The most common destination for the vast majority of departed souls was the Asphodel Meadows. This was a bleak, desolate, and perpetually gray landscape, a somber plain stretching endlessly, carpeted only with asphodel, a pale, ghost-like flower. Here, the ordinary souls of the departed, those who had committed neither great good nor great evil in their lives, resided. Their existence in the Asphodel Meadows was not one of active torment, but rather a joyless, aimless wandering. They were mere shades, or idola, insubstantial phantoms, devoid of their mortal memories and passions, engaging in mundane, repetitive activities without purpose or true feeling. They were shadowy reflections of their former selves, without genuine happiness or profound sorrow, an existence that reinforced the Greek view that true life, vibrant and meaningful, could only be experienced in the mortal world of sunlight. It was a fate that emphasized the value of earthly existence. In stark contrast to the dreary asphodel meadows lay Elysium, also known as the Elysian Fields, or the Islands of the Blessed. This was the paradise of the underworld, a realm of perpetual beauty, peace, and joyous tranquility. This was not merely a region, but a vast, bottomless abyss, a chasm of primordial darkness, surrounded by bronze walls and iron gates, far below the house of Hades itself. Tartarus served as the grim prison for the most egregious offenders, especially the defeated Titans who had waged war against the Olympians. It was a place of eternal, unimaginable torment, reserved for those who had committed truly heinous crimes against the gods or humanity. Here, the suffering was active and unending, tailored to the specific transgressions of the damned. Its very atmosphere was one of despair and unceasing agony, a place where light never penetrated and hope was an unknown concept. Elysium was reserved for the most virtuous of souls, heroes who had performed extraordinary deeds, those who had been exceptionally pious, or those who were favored by the gods. It was a place bathed in its own soft, golden light, always vibrant with blooming flowers, lush groves, and gentle breezes. The inhabitants of Elysium enjoyed a blessed afterlife, free from suffering, toiling, or sorrow. They spent their days in pleasant pursuits, engaging in music, feasting, athletic contests, or simply enjoying eternal peace and happiness. Here, heroes like Achilles, Cadmus, and Peleus were said to reside, their glory continuing even in death. For those who achieved it, Elysium was the ultimate reward, a testament to a life well lived and divinely favored. At the very bottom of the underworld, deeper than any other realm, lay Tartarus. Within Tartarus and its surrounding areas, several famous figures endured their eternal punishments, their suffering a grim warning against hubris and divine offense. Sisyphus, condemned to eternally push a massive boulder up a steep hill, only for it to roll back down just as it reached the summit, a ceaseless, futile toil for having repeatedly defied the gods and cheated death. Tantalus, forced to stand in a pool of water beneath a fruit tree, forever tantalized by water that receded when he tried to drink, and fruit that withered when he reached for it, suffering eternal hunger and thirst for stealing ambrosia and nectar from the gods and serving his son S-flesh to them. Ixion, chained to a fiery, eternally spinning wheel for attempting to seduce Hera. The Danaids, the 50 daughters of Danaus, who, with the exception of one, murdered their husbands on their wedding night. Their punishment was to perpetually carry water in sieves or leaky jars, attempting to fill a bottomless basin, a symbol of their endless, fruitless labor. The Titans themselves, guarded by the Hecatonchires, were confined to the deepest parts of Tartarus, their colossal forms enduring eternal darkness and chains, a permanent testament to the Olympians' victory. Beyond the core rulers, the underworld was populated by various key inhabitants and figures who played crucial roles in the administration and enforcement of its laws. They resided in the underworld, eternally pursuing and tormenting those who committed unpunished crimes, particularly matricide, patricide, perjury, and breaking sacred oaths. With their serpentine hair, bat-like wings, and relentless pursuit, they embodied divine retribution and ensured that moral transgressions, especially those involving kindred blood, did not go unpunished, driving the guilty to madness and despair until they atoned for their sins. These three mortal kings, renowned for their wisdom and justice in life, were appointed by Hades to weigh the soul's deeds upon their arrival in the underworld. Minos was the primary arbiter for all souls. Rhadamanthus judged those from the east, and Iacchus judged those from the west. They listened to the accounts of the souls, lives assessing their virtues and transgressions. And it was their judgment that determined whether a soul was sent to the bleak asphodel meadows, the blissful Elysium, or the tormented depths of Tartarus. Their presence underscored the Greek belief in a form of divine justice, where actions in life had consequences in the afterlife. The most important among them were the judges of the dead, Minos, Rhadamanthus, and Iacchus. The Erinyes, also known as the Furies, were terrifying and ancient goddesses born from the blood of Uranus. Thanatos, the gentle yet inexorable personification of death, was often depicted as a winged youth, the twin brother of Hypnos and a son of Nyx. He was the one who personally carried off the deceased, a somber but necessary figure who ensured the natural cycle of life and death. His twin, Hypnos, represented sleep, offering respite from the sorrows of the world, often seen as a prelude to death. And the Lamia, the vast majority of the underworld's population, however, consisted of the countless shades or ghosts of the departed, eternally existing in their assigned regions, forever separated from the world of the living. Hecate, a powerful and enigmatic goddess, was often associated with the underworld, magic, witchcraft, crossroads, and ghosts. She was a chthonic deity, moving freely between the mortal world, the divine realm, and the underworld, often invoked by those practicing dark arts or seeking guidance at liminal spaces. She was a goddess of boundaries and transitions. Her presence, a reminder of the mysterious and often fearful aspects of the night and the supernatural, after his beloved wife, Eurydice, died from a snakebite. Orpheus, heartbroken and inconsolable, resolved to retrieve her from the underworld. Armed with only his lyre and his unparalleled musical talent, he descended into Hades' realm. His melancholic and beautiful music enchanted Cerberus, moved the Furies to tears, and even softened the stern hearts of Hades and Persephone. They agreed to allow Eurydice to return to the mortal world, but with one strict condition. Orpheus must walk ahead of her, and he must not look back at her until they had both fully emerged into the sunlight. As they neared the exit, Orpheus, anxious and fearing that Eurydice might not be following, or perhaps overcome by doubt, glanced back at her. In that instant, she was pulled back into the shadows, gone forever. Orpheus's journey is a powerful tale of love, loss, the power of art, and the cruel finality of divine decrees. The underworld also housed other, lesser entities, such as the OLYMPUS. Despite its terrifying reputation as a realm of no return, a few exceptional mortal visitors managed to descend into the underworld and, through divine favor or extraordinary courage, return to the land of the living, a feat known as catabasis. These journeys were often perilous quests, undertaken for profound reasons, testing the limits of human endurance and divine intervention. One of the most poignant and tragic journeys was that of Orpheus, the legendary musician and poet. Odysseus, the cunning hero of the Trojan War, undertook his own perilous journey to the underworld. During his long voyage home, he did not seek to bring anyone back from the dead, but rather to consult the blind prophet Tiresias, whose wisdom transcended life and death. Following Circe's instructions, Odysseus performed a ritual sacrifice, digging a trench and filling it with the blood of sacrificed animals, which lured the shades of the dead to drink from it. granting them temporary lucidity. There, he encountered many famous shades. His own mother, Anticlea, from whom he learned of the situation in Ithaca. His fallen comrades from the Trojan War, including Agamemnon and the great Achilles. He also saw the tormented figures of Tantalus, Sisyphus, and others suffering their eternal punishments. Tiresias, after drinking the blood, revealed the prophecies concerning Odysseus's arduous journey home and the challenges he would face, particularly from Poseidon's wrath. Heracles, the mighty hero, famously descended into the underworld as his 12th and final labor to retrieve Cerberus, the three-headed guardian dog. Unlike other visitors, Heracles did not go to plead or consult, but to perform a physical feat. He sought permission from Hades, who, impressed by Heracles' courage, granted it on the condition that Heracles subdue Cerberus using no weapons, only his bare hands. After a titanic struggle, Heracles managed to wrestle Cerberus into submission, dragging the terrified beast to Eurystheus before returning him to the underworld. His journey demonstrated his unparalleled strength, even in the face of death's ultimate guardian, reinforcing his status as the greatest of heroes. In contrast to Heracles' success, the foolish journey of Theseus and his friend Pirithous to the underworld ended in disaster. Pirithous, driven by an arrogant desire, conspired with Theseus to abduct Persephone and make her Pirithous' queen. Their audacity was a grave insult to Hades. Hades, feigning hospitality, invited them to sit on enchanted seats, the chairs of forgetfulness. Once they sat, they became irrevocably bound to the chairs, their memories fading, forever trapped in the underworld. Heracles, during his labor to retrieve Cerberus, managed to free Theseus, but Pirithous remained eternally bound, a grim warning against hubris and attempts to defy the gods of the dead. While primarily a Roman epic, Virgil's Aeneid provides a deeply influential account of Aeneas's descent into the underworld, reflecting and expanding upon Greek traditions. Guided by the Sibyl of Cuni, Aeneas journeys to the underworld to seek counsel from the shade of his deceased father, Anchises. It was believed that a soul could only truly pass into the underworld and find rest if the body received a proper burial, with the coin placed for Charon. An unburied body meant a restless spirit, condemned to wander endlessly between worlds, unable to find peace, haunting its living relatives. While Homeric and earlier traditions often depicted a melancholic existence in the asphodel meadows, later philosophical and mystery cults, like the Orphic and Eleusinian mysteries, offered a more hopeful vision, suggesting that through initiation and virtuous living, one could achieve a blessed afterlife in Elysium, or even a cycle of reincarnation. Plato, in his myth of explored the concept of judgment, punishment, reward, and the cyclical nature of souls choosing their next lives, offering a philosophical interpretation that differed from the literal mythological accounts, yet still acknowledged the moral consequences of earthly actions. The Greek underworld, therefore, was not a static concept, but a dynamic, an evolving landscape, reflecting the ancient Greeks' constant contemplation of mortality, justice, and the mysteries beyond the veil of life. This belief instilled a deep respect for funerary rituals and a fear of dying unburied. Offerings at grave sites, libations, and prayers to the chthonic deities were common practices, believed to sustain the dead or keep them appeased. His purpose was not merely curiosity, but to understand his destiny and the future of his people, the Romans. In the underworld, Anchises reveals to Aeneas a grand vision of future Roman heroes and the glorious destiny of Rome, a scene that profoundly shaped Roman identity and their connection to their Greek mythological heritage. This journey underscores the concept of ancestral wisdom and the continuity of fate across generations, even beyond death. The ancient Greek understanding of the underworld and the afterlife profoundly influenced their beliefs and practices related to death. Proper burial rites were paramount. The fear of the dead, or specifically of restless ghosts, was a real concern. These spirits were believed to linger in the mortal world, causing misfortune or seeking vengeance. Conversely, the concept of hero cults emerged, where deceased heroes, believed to possess special powers even in death, were worshipped at their tombs. These heroes, having achieved some form of divine favor or extraordinary status, could intercede on behalf of mortals, bringing blessings or protection to their communities, blurring the lines between mortal, divine, and the afterlife. Philosophical thought also grappled with the nature of the afterlife, the wisdom and folly of mortals. Lessons from myth beyond their grand narratives of cosmic battles, divine intrigues, and heroic quests. The myths of ancient Greece served a profoundly didactic purpose. They were not merely entertaining stories or explanations for natural phenomena. They functioned as a rich and complex moral framework, a vibrant tapestry woven with cautionary tales and exemplary narratives designed to instruct mortals on the delicate balance between human aspiration and divine power. Niobe was blessed with immense wealth, power, and, most notably, 14 beautiful children, 7 sons and 7 daughters, all renowned for their striking beauty and strength. Blinded by her immense pride in her numerous offspring, Niobe made the fatal error of boasting that she was superior to the goddess Leto, the mother of only 2 children, the radiant twins, Apollo and Artemis. Niobe openly mocked Leto's seemingly meager brood, claiming that her own abundance of children made her more deserving of worship and respect. This direct insult, this blatant challenge to a divine being's status and maternal pride, immediately drew the swift and terrible wrath of the slighted goddess. Leto, though often gentle, was a formidable goddess when provoked. She appealed to her divine children, Apollo and Artemis, to avenge her honor. The divine twins, formidable archers, descended upon Thebes. Apollo, with his deadly silver bow, mercilessly shot down all of Niobe's 7 sons as they practiced athletics in the city square. Artemis, equally swift and merciless, then struck down all of Niobe's 7 daughters within their palace as they mourned their brothers. Niobe, witnessing the agonizing, simultaneous slaughter of all her beloved children, one by one, was overcome with inconsolable grief. She wept so profusely that her body literally turned into stone, yet even as a rock, her tears continued to flow, forming a perpetual stream. Her tragic transformation served as an eternal monument to the dire consequences of challenging a god, a poignant and terrifying reminder that mortal pride, no matter how great, could never stand against divine power without facing utter annihilation. These myths articulated fundamental truths about the human condition, the nature of virtue and vice, and the inevitable consequences of certain actions, particularly in the eyes of the ever-watchful Olympian gods. They illustrated the proper ways to live, to interact with one's fellow mortals, and, crucially, to show reverence and respect to the powerful deities who governed the cosmos. The gods themselves, though immortal and all-powerful, often mirrored human virtues and vices, albeit on a grander, more destructive scale, providing a divine lens through which to examine mortal flaws and strengths. Central to this moral universe was the concept of Erit, which encompassed excellence, virtue, and valor, and its formidable counterpart, Nemesis, the inescapable, divine retribution that awaited those who transgressed established norms, particularly those who committed the sin of hubris. The most prominent and frequently emphasized lesson in Greek mythology was the peril of hubris, or excessive pride, arrogance, and overweening self-confidence that led a mortal to believe themselves equal to, or superior to, the gods. Such transgression was seen as a direct challenge to the divine order, an affront that inevitably drew swift and often brutal nemesis. Countless myths served as chilling warnings against this profound moral failing, illustrating the catastrophic consequences of forgetting one's mortal place in the cosmic hierarchy. One of the most tragic and illustrative examples of hubris is the tale of Niobe, the proud queen of Thebes, wife of King Amphion. Another compelling narrative of hubris involved Arachne, a young mortal woman from Lydia who possessed extraordinary skill in weaving and embroidery. Her tapestries were so intricately detailed and exquisitely beautiful that nymphs and mortals alike would gather to admire her work. Salmoneus was a king so consumed by his own arrogance that he believed himself to be Zeus. When Dionysus, the god of wine, revelry, and ecstasy, returned to his ancestral city of Thebes to establish his cult, Pentheus, a stern and rigid ruler, vehemently refused to acknowledge Dionysus's divine status. He mocked the god, imprisoned his followers, and strictly forbade the ecstatic rituals associated with Dionysian worship, viewing them as immoral and chaotic. Dionysus, insulted by Pentheus's rejection and hubris, systematically orchestrated the king's downfall. He drove the women of Thebes, including Pentheus's own mother, Agave, into a state of divine madness, leading them to abandon the city and engage in wild, frenzied revelry on Mount Cithaeron. Pentheus, consumed by curiosity and a desire to stop the debauchery, secretly went to spy on the Maenads. Dionysus, further manipulating his madness, led him into a trap. In their ecstatic frenzy, the Maenads, believing Pentheus to be a wild beast, attacked him with their bare hands, tearing him limb from limb. His own mother, Agave, in her delusion, severed his head, impaled it on her thyrsus, and proudly carried it back to Thebes, only realizing the horrific truth when she returned to sanity. Pentheus' gruesome death served as a terrifying warning against denying a god their due worship and attempting to suppress the primal forces of nature and emotion they represented. In an act of extreme blasphemy and delusion, he commanded his subjects to worship him as the king of the gods. He even went so far as to build a bronze bridge over his city, over which he would drive his chariot, dragging bronze cauldrons behind him and throwing lit torches into the air, attempting to mimic the thunder and lightning of Zeus himself. This was an intolerable affront to the true king of the gods. Zeus, witnessing this outrageous display of mortal hubris and impiety, responded with swift and terrifying nemesis. He hurled a genuine thunderbolt from the heavens, utterly incinerating Salmoneus, his entire palace, and his city, leaving nothing but scorched earth and a devastating reminder of the folly of attempting to usurp divine authority. Arachne, unfortunately, allowed her immense talent to swell her ego to an arrogant degree. She openly boasted that her weaving prowess was superior even to that of Athena, the goddess of crafts, wisdom, and strategic warfare, who herself was a master weaver. Not content with merely claiming superiority, Arachne even dared to challenge the goddess to a public weaving contest. Athena, in a rare act of restraint, first appeared to Arachne disguised as an old woman, advising her to retract her challenge and show respect to the gods. But Arachne, filled with scorn, scoffed at the old woman's advice, only intensifying her arrogant claims. Enraged, Athena revealed her true divine form, accepting the challenge. The contest began, and both wove magnificent tapestries. Athena depicted scenes of the gods' majesty and their triumph over mortal hubris, particularly the fate of those who defied them. Arachne, in defiance, wove a tapestry that depicted the gods engaging in scandalous love affairs and deceitful acts, mocking their flaws and improprieties. Even Athena had to admit the mortal's skill was flawless. However, the blasphemous subject matter of Arachne's tapestry and her blatant disrespect infuriated Athena beyond measure. In a fit of divine rage, Athena struck Arachne with her shuttle, tearing her tapestry to shreds. Overwhelmed by shame and despair, Arachne attempted to hang herself, but Athena, perhaps with a perverse sense of mercy or desiring a more lasting punishment that would serve as a perpetual warning, transformed Arachne into a spider. From that day forward, Arachne and all her descendants were condemned to spin webs from their own bodies, eternally weaving, a stark and fitting punishment for her hubris and challenge to a god's artistic domain. The story of King Salmanus of Elis offers a chilling example of direct usurpation of divine power. The tragedy of Pentheus, the young king of Thebes, illustrates the dire consequences of denying a god's divinity and suppressing their rightful worship. The myth of Ixion, the king of the Lapiths, exemplifies hubris involving a direct affront to divine marital sanctity. Ixion was an oath-breaker and a murderer of his father-in-law. When Zeus, in a rare act of mercy, purified him of his crimes and allowed him to feast on Mount Olympus, Ixion's mortal arrogance swelled. Ajax the Greater, the formidable Achaean warrior, a man of immense strength and courage, often suffered from a lack of self-awareness and an inflated sense of his own invincibility. During the Trojan War, he famously received divine aid from Poseidon, who helped him survive a shipwreck. However, Ajax later boasted that he had escaped the sea against the will of the gods, insulting Poseidon. Later, after Achilles' death, when the divine armor of Achilles was awarded to Odysseus instead of him, Ajax felt profoundly dishonored. In his rage, he believed the Achaean leaders had committed a grave injustice. In a fit of madness, sent by Athena, who likely orchestrated his downfall due to his earlier insolence and his subsequent crimes during the sack of Troy, specifically the violation of Cassandra, he slaughtered a flock of sheep, believing them to be the Greek leaders. Upon regaining his sanity and realizing the depth of his humiliating delusion, Ajax, unable to live with the shame, committed suicide by falling upon his own sword. His death served as a grim reminder that even the most powerful mortals, when driven by pride and blinded by perceived injustice, could invite divine retribution and orchestrate their own tragic downfall. He dared to lust after Hera, Zeus's queen, and even attempted to seduce her. Zeus, aware of Ixion's base intentions, created a cloud in Hera's likeness, called Nephili. Ixion, deceived, copulated with the cloud goddess, unknowingly fathering the centaurs. for his audacious and unforgivable transgression against the sanctity of divine marriage. Zeus unleashed a terrible punishment. Ixion was bound to a fiery, eternally spinning wheel in Tartarus, condemned to suffer endless torment, perpetually turning, a perpetual symbol of his boundless insolence. The tale of Sisyphus, the cunning and deceitful king of Corinth, further illustrates the folly of challenging the gods' established order, particularly concerning death. Sisyphus was known for his trickery and avarice. He famously angered Zeus by revealing one of his affairs. More egregiously, he managed to twice cheat death. First, when Thanatos, death personified, came to claim him, Sisyphus cleverly trapped Thanatos in chains, leading to a period where no one could die, causing chaos. Ares eventually freed Thanatos, who then took Sisyphus. But Sisyphus had instructed his wife not to perform proper burial rites. Thus, in the underworld, he complained to Persephone that he was unburied and received permission to return to the mortal world to scold his wife. Once back, he refused to return to the underworld. Finally, Hermes forcibly dragged him back for his repeated defiance of the gods and his clever attempts to subvert the natural order of life and death. Sisyphus was condemned to an eternal and futile punishment in Tartarus. He was forced to perpetually roll a massive boulder up a steep hill. Just as he neared the summit, the stone would always roll back down, condemning him to an unending, meaningless cycle of labor. A stark and famous symbol of eternal frustration and the ultimate futility of defying fate and the gods' will. Even noble heroes were not immune to the dangers of hubris. The tale of Oedipus, while deeply steeped in the inevitability of fate, also carries undertones of hubris, particularly in his initial attempts to outrun a prophecy. Born with the dreadful prophecy that he would kill his father and marry his mother, Oedipus fled Corinth, the city where he was raised, believing its king and queen were his true parents. These stories demonstrated that humility, reverence, and adherence to divine law brought blessings and protection. His act of flight, while understandable, was an attempt to defy a divine decree. Agamemnon's initial act of impiety, whether a boast or killing a sacred animal, offended Artemis. His subsequent dilemma, caught between the goddess's demand for his daughter's life and the need to sail for Troy, underscored the profound consequences of offending a god. The eventual sacrifice of Iphigenia was not merely a tragic event, but a necessary atonement, a stark demonstration that divine favor could only be restored through a profound act of reverence and sacrifice, even if it was horrific in its execution. It illustrated the absolute power of the gods to demand atonement for disrespect. One day, Zeus and Hermes descended to earth in disguise, seeking shelter and hospitality. They went from door to door, but every wealthy household turned them away. Only Philemon and Baucis, despite their meager possessions, welcomed the disguised strangers into their humble cottage with open hearts and genuine generosity. They shared their last scraps of food and wine, offering everything they had with sincere warmth and selfless devotion. Impressed by their unparalleled piety and generosity, Zeus revealed his true identity and rewarded them richly. He spared their humble cottage from a devastating flood that destroyed the impious, inhospitable villagers, transforming their home into a magnificent temple. He also granted their wish to be priests of his temple and to die at the same moment, ensuring they would never be separated. Upon their death, they were transformed into an intertwining oak and lime tree, growing side by side, forever a symbol of their enduring love, their deep piety, and the divine reward for true hospitality. On his journey, he killed an old man in a fit of road rage, and then, by solving the riddle of the Sphinx, became king of Thebes, unknowingly marrying the widowed queen. Oedipus, despite his intelligence in solving the Sphinx's riddle, exhibited a form of hubris in his blindness to the truth, his unwavering confidence in his own innocence, and his relentless pursuit of the truth, even when warned. When the terrible truth was finally revealed, Oedipus, in despair and horror, blinded himself, while fate was undeniably a colossal force in his story. Oedipus's actions and his unwillingness to accept uncomfortable truths contributed to his profound tragedy, serving as a warning against the limits of human agency in the face of divine will. In direct contrast to the destructive consequences of hubris, Greek myths also lauded and rewarded virtues such as piety and respect for the gods. The heartwarming story of Philemon and Baucis, an elderly, impoverished couple from Phrygia, stands as a quintessential example of piety and hospitality rewarded. While already mentioned in the context of the Trojan War, the sacrifice at Aulis serves as a grim example of the necessity of appeasing divine wrath.
The myth of Demeter and the household of King Celeus and Queen Metaneira at Eleusis provides a nuanced lesson about piety and human fear. After Persephone's abduction, Demeter, disguised as an old woman, arrived at Eleusis. She was kindly welcomed by Celeus and Metaneira, who, despite their sorrow, offered her hospitality and allowed her to nurse their infant son. Demeter, out of gratitude and a desire to repay their kindness, began a ritual to make them immortal by anointing him with ambrosia during the day and placing him in the heart of the fire at night, burning away his mortal parts. However, one night, Metaneira, driven by maternal fear and curiosity, discovered her child in the flames. Her terrified scream broke Demeter's ritual. The goddess, frustrated by human ignorance and lack of faith, revealed her true divine form. While Demophoon could not achieve full immortality, Demeter, recognizing the family's piety, taught them the sacred rites of her Eleusinian mysteries, which promised initiates a blessed afterlife, thus offering a different, profound blessing. This story illustrates that even well-intentioned human interference, when driven by fear or a lack of understanding of divine ways, could disrupt a god's benevolence, but sincere piety could still lead to profound blessings. The concept of xenia, or hospitality, was a cornerstone of ancient Greek society, and a profoundly sacred law, zealously protected by Zeus himself, who was often invoked as Zeus Xenios, the protector of guests and hosts. Violating xenia was a grave offense, an act of impiety that rarely went unpunished. The primary and most heartwarming example of xenia is, again, the story of Philemon and Baucis, who exemplified perfect hospitality and received the gods' ultimate blessing. Their selfless generosity demonstrated the ideal practice of xenia when Odysseus and his men stumbled upon Polyphemus's cave. They expected to be offered hospitality, as was customary. However, Polyphemus, a monstrous, lawless giant, showed no respect for gods or men. Instead of offering food or shelter, he callously devoured Odysseus's men, one by one, sealing the cave entrance to trap the rest. This was an egregious violation of sacred hospitality. Odysseus, through his cunning, blinded the Cyclops and escaped, but his act of blinding a son of Poseidon earned him to see God's relentless wrath. The suffering Odysseus endured on his decade-long journey home was, in part, divine retribution for his actions against Polyphemus, but the Cyclops' initial barbaric act served as the ultimate example of a behavior that warranted severe punishment. On the other end of the spectrum, the horrific example of the Cyclops Polyphemus in Homer's Odyssey showcases the brutal consequences of violating Xenia.
The entire Trojan War can also be viewed as the catastrophic consequence of a profound violation of Xenia. When Paris visited Menelaus in Sparta as a guest, he was welcomed with traditional Greek hospitality. Yet, he abused this sacred trust by abducting Helen Menelaus's wife and stealing his possessions. This betrayal of hospitality was a direct insult to Zeusinios and a breach of a fundamental moral code, justifying the Greek call to arms and their decade-long war to reclaim Menelaus' honor and punish the violation. Finally, the suitors of Penelope in the Odyssey present a drawn-out, egregious example of Xenia violation. For 10 years, while Odysseus was presumed dead, these noblemen invaded his palace, feasting on his provisions, abusing his servants, and pressuring his wife, Penelope, to choose a new husband. They were guests in his house, but they behaved with monstrous disrespect, consuming his wealth, disrespecting his family, and abandoning all norms of hospitality. Their ultimate brutal slaughter by Odysseus upon his return with the full backing of Athena and Zeus was presented as a righteous act of divine justice, the necessary nemesis for their profound and sustained violation of the sacred law of Xenia. Another important cautionary theme in Greek myths revolved around the dangers of curiosity and forbidden knowledge, particularly when it defied divine warnings or sought to uncover secrets best left hidden. The myth of Pandora's box serves as a foundational tale about the origin of suffering and the perils of insatiable curiosity. After Prometheus stole fire for humanity, Zeus, in his rage, orchestrated a gift to mankind. Pandora, the first woman, crafted by Hephaestus and endowed with many charms by the gods. She was given a beautiful jar and explicitly warned never to open it. However, Pandora's insatiable curiosity, a trait given to her by the gods themselves, overcame her caution. She lifted the lid of the jar, and immediately all the evils, sorrows, diseases, and hardships of the world flew out, unleashing misery upon humanity. Only hope remained trapped inside, clinging to the rim of the jar as Pandora frantically slammed the lid shut. The myth illustrates that unchecked curiosity, particularly when combined with disobedience to divine warnings, can unleash unforeseen and devastating consequences upon the world, changing the very nature of human existence forever. The story of Psyche and Eros also highlights the dangers of curiosity and a lack of trust. Psyche, a mortal princess of breathtaking beauty, was loved by the god Eros, Aphrodite's son. After her abduction by Hades, Persephone was told she could return to the mortal world if she had not consumed anything in the realm of the dead. However, either out of hunger, curiosity, or gentle trickery by Hades, she ate a few pomegranate seeds. This act, though seemingly small, was a consumption of the food of the dead, a symbolic and binding act that forever linked her to the underworld. It meant she could not fully escape Hades' realm, forcing her to spend a portion of each year there. This myth emphasizes that certain actions, even seemingly minor ones, driven by curiosity or hunger, could have profound and irreversible consequences, irrevocably shaping one's destiny. Eros, under strict instructions from his mother to make Psyche fall in love with a monster, instead fell deeply in love with her himself. He secretly visited her every night under the cover of darkness, forbidding her to look upon his face, fearing his mother's wrath. Psyche, influenced by her jealous sisters, grew curious and suspicious about her mysterious lover. One night, she lit a lamp, hoping to glimpse his face. A drop of hot oil fell on Eros, waking him and revealing his divine form. Feeling betrayed by her lack of trust and her forbidden curiosity, Eros flew away, leaving Psyche heartbroken. Her subsequent trials, imposed by Aphrodite, were a direct consequence of her disobedience and insatiable curiosity, teaching her humility, patience, and unwavering faith before she could finally be reunited with Eros and achieve divinity. While not purely about curiosity, Persephone's eating of the pomegranate seeds in the underworld carries a similar lesson about the binding nature of forbidden consumption. The intricate interplay between fate and free will was a central philosophical and narrative theme in Greek mythology, often demonstrating that while individuals could make choices, their ultimate destiny was often predetermined by powerful, inescapable forces. Myths frequently explored the tension between human agency and the decrees of the Moirai, who spun, measured, and cut the thread of life. The tragic cycle of Oedipus is the most potent example of this tension. The prophecy that he would kill his father and marry his mother was set before his birth. Every action Oedipus took to avoid this fate, his flight from Corinth, his ignorance of his true parentage, his decision to kill the stranger on the road, ironically led him directly into its embrace. His free will in choosing to leave Corinth or to fight the old man on the road was undeniable. But these choices ultimately served to fulfill a destiny he desperately wished to escape. The myth suggests that while humans may make choices, their choices often lead them along a path already laid out by fate, highlighting the terrifying inevitability of divine decree. Achilles' choice, too, epitomizes this conflict. He was presented with a clear prophecy. He could live a long, peaceful, and unmemorable life, or a short, glorious, and eternally famous one. Prometheus, a titan who sided with Zeus in the Titanomachy, defied Zeus's decree by stealing fire and giving it to humanity, teaching them crafts and arts. This act was a deliberate choice, driven by compassion for mortals, directly against the will of the supreme god. Prometheus knew the terrible punishment that awaited him, eternal torment, chained to a rock with an eagle devouring his liver daily. But he chose to endure it for the benefit of humanity. His myth explores the moral complexities of defiance, sacrifice, and the enduring power of compassion in the face of tyranny, showcasing that while divine retribution is absolute, the will to make a morally conscious choice, even against divine power, is a fundamental aspect of heroic character. Achilles, despite knowing the brevity of the latter, freely chose the path of glory, leading him to Troy and his fated death. Here, free will exists within the bounds of a predetermined choice, showing that, while destiny offers options, the hero actively chooses his path, accepting the consequences. Even the foundational myth of Prometheus contains elements of defying predetermined order, though it's more about defying Zeus's will than fate itself. Finally, Greek mythology delves deeply into the overwhelming power and peril of love and desire. These primal emotions, often embodied by the goddess Aphrodite, could inspire incredible acts of devotion and creation. This single act, driven by illicit desire and divine manipulation, highlights how powerful the force of love could be. capable of plunging entire civilizations into a decade of bloody conflict and utter destruction. Medea, a powerful sorceress, fell deeply in love with Jason, driven by Aphrodite's influence. Her love led her to betray her family, her father, and her homeland, committing monstrous acts to aid Jason in acquiring the Golden Fleece. However, when Jason later abandoned her for another princess, Medea's passionate love transformed into a horrific, all-consuming hatred and desire for revenge. Her actions, culminating in the brutal murder of their own children to spite Jason, served as a chilling testament to how love, when betrayed, could become the most destructive force, leading to unimaginable acts of violence and despair. It underscores that unchecked desire, even when divinely influenced, can lead to widespread suffering, but also trigger devastating conflicts, betrayals, and tragedies, demonstrating their capacity to profoundly shape mortal and even divine destinies. The entire Trojan War, as discussed, was triggered by Aphrodite's promise of the most beautiful woman to Paris and his subsequent abduction of Helen. The tragic story of Medea exemplifies the destructive potential of obsessive love and desire transformed into vengeful fury. The myth of Phaedra and Hippolytus explores the dark side of forbidden desire. Phaedra, the wife of King Theseus and stepmother to his chaste son, Hippolytus, was cursed by Aphrodite. Phaedra developed an uncontrollable, illicit love for her stepson. When Hippolytus rejected her advances, horrified by her impure passion, Phaedra, fearing exposure and shame, took her own life, but left a false note accusing Hippolytus of assault. Theseus, believing his wife's lie, cursed his son using one of Poseidon's granted wishes, leading to Hippolytus's gruesome death. The tragedy highlights the destructive power of unrequited, forbidden desire, leading to false accusations, a father's mistaken wrath, and the ruin of innocent lives, all orchestrated by divine vengeance. Finally, the tale of Narcissus and Echo beautifully illustrates the perils of self-love and unrequited passion. Narcissus was a young man of extraordinary beauty who scorned all those who loved him. These tales, far from being mere fantastical stories, served as powerful ethical and moral guides for the ancient Greeks. They taught profound lessons about the dangers of hubris and arrogance, the necessity of piety and respect for divine authority, the sacredness of hospitality, the perils of unchecked curiosity, and the complex interplay between fate and free will. They illuminated the dual nature of human emotions, particularly love and desire, showing their capacity for both great beauty and immense destruction. By observing the triumphs and more often the tragic downfalls of their heroes and villains, mortals were continually reminded of the importance of living a virtuous life, maintaining proper reverence for the gods, and understanding their place within the grand, often unforgiving, cosmic order. The enduring power of these myths lies in their timeless ability to reflect the complexities of the human spirit and to offer guidance in navigating the universal challenges of existence. Echo, a nymph cursed by Hera to only repeat the last words spoken to her, fell desperately in love with Narcissus, but could only repeat his words, unable to convey her true feelings. Narcissus, cruelly rejecting her, condemned her to waste away until only her voice remained. For his arrogance and his disdain for love, Narcissus was cursed by Nemesis to fall in love with his own reflection in a pool of water. He became so consumed by his unattainable self-love that he could not tear himself away. eventually wasting away and transforming into a flower. This myth serves as a timeless warning against excessive vanity, the perils of unrequited love, and the devastating consequences of rejecting genuine affection in favor of self-absorption. In conclusion, the wisdom embedded within Greek mythology is vast and multifaceted.